Hello everyone, and welcome to this, our first look at prototyping 2D in Unity. My name is Kasanas. There's going to be a few questions. Are you back, Kasanas? And yes, I am. I am back for a very particular reason. I'm probably not going to be playing a lot of games in here, and maybe I'll do it every once in a while. But what we're going to be doing in my videos, in my video series from now on, is we're going to be exploring game design. We're going to be exploring game design. I am a professor at George Brown College here in Toronto. I teach in the game design department, and this semester I am actually teaching prototyping 2D. So I thought that I would build for both my students and all of you out there on YouTube, all of my viewers, this game and build the videos associated with making this game. And that way my students can go back and use it as a review for the courses I've taught, and you out there, all my faithful viewers, can go through and follow along and build this game. Now, it's not truly a game. It does have a beginning and a middle and an end, meaning you start the game, you can run along and shoot things and jump and run and etc. That's all awesome. There's enemies and there's different things to explore, and you're either going to die or you're going to make it to the end of the level. It is a non-procedurally generated level, meaning that it's already in place. I'm not generating it as we move. I've already created the level. You can make it to the end of the level, and afterwards you're going to win the game. No one's going to want to buy this game afterwards. No one. It is really just for demonstration purposes. I am going to teach you the techniques that I use to build this simplistic, side-scrolling platformer. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Give you the techniques to be able to build it. And afterwards, you guys can use those same techniques to make complex and interesting games that people are going to be interested in playing. That is my goal for this series. When you're finished, I am really hoping that you will be able to go through and build yourself a platformer just like this, but make it awesome. Don't make this, make it awesome, alright guys? Show me what you got afterwards. I really want to see, once this whole series is done, what you guys built. My students are going to show me. My students are going to show me in class what they built. They're going to show other classmates as well, and I want to see what you guys built too. So, if you're interested in following along, go on to the Unity site, download Unity. That is the engine we're going to be using. It is an awesome free engine. It does almost anything you want it to do. The free version does almost anything you want it to do. So guys, head over there, download Unity. I am using Unity 5.004 or something like that. I forget exactly what it is. Get the latest version. It's going to be all kind of the same. And we're not doing anything really weird anyway. It's really simple stuff. Get the latest version, download it. I built all the assets in Photoshop. Everything was done in Photoshop, guys. So download the assets, find stuff online, and follow along. Alright? I'm really excited to be able to show you how to do this. If you guys are excited that I'm back, if you guys are excited to be able to do this kind of stuff, then let me know with a thumbs up down below. A comment down below is also great. Say hi, ask any of your questions, whatever you want to know, and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer them. Alright everybody, have yourselves a wonderful day.
Een briochebroodje, krokante kip, knapperig spek en gegrilde ajuin. Ontdek de Bacon Clubhouse Chicken en Bacon Clubhouse Beef. Nu bij McDonald's.
Writing's not that easy, but Grammarly can help. This sentence is grammatically correct, but it's wordy and hard to read. It undermines the writer's message, and the word choice is bland. Grammarly's cutting-edge technology helps you craft compelling, understandable writing that makes an impact on your reader. Much better. Are you ready to give it a try? Installation is simple and free. Visit Grammarly.com today.
Met Pay&Go Plus krijg je voor een klein prijsje veel data. Wat je daar allemaal mee kan doen, ontdek het hier.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this, a first look at Unity. My name is Kasanas. Guys, I am really looking forward to being back on YouTube, and I'm really looking forward to this new series. I mentioned in an earlier video, I'm coming back, and I'll be teaching you guys the same stuff I'm teaching my students at George Brown College here in Toronto. What I really want to do is make sure I start off right. I want to make sure that you guys are up to speed and understand the things that my students are also understanding. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick look at the Unity interface. And for some of you, you might be saying, oh, don't show me that, just get on with the programming. Guys, I want to make sure that we are all following along and on the same page. And that way everyone is going to be able to keep up with the pace that I'm going at. It's not going to be a fast pace. We're going to be going nice and slow and easy. The first thing we're going to take a look at is the game that I've already shown you. It is going to be a 2D platformer, but I want to make sure that before we start any of that kind of stuff, you guys understand the engine we're using, understand the interface of the engine we're using, and that way when I mention certain things, you won't be like, I don't know what he's talking about. All right, so let's start off right away. This is Unity, and I'm currently using Unity 5. It's 64-bit version, the personal version. It's not a paid program. I didn't pay for this. It's absolutely free. Go and check it out. Just do a quick search on, I think it's www.unity3d.com, and right there you guys will be able to find it and download the latest version of Unity. And like I said, the personal edition is great. With Unity 5, they made a ton of updates, and they have given you a lot of things that in the past you had to pay for. Okay, so first of all, when you guys open up Unity, it might not look exactly like this. Unity is extremely flexible, and you can set it up any way you want. You can set it up so your workflow is what's going to work best for you. Okay, so I'm going to discuss the different panels I've currently got up. And if yours aren't in the same place, don't worry about it. Over here, we'll start right in this corner over here, the layouts. There are a bunch of different layouts. You can set them up, 2x3, anything you want. Go through and look and see if there is something that you like in there, okay? Well, now I'm back on the default. But that's okay. That'll make it easier for us to take a look at later on. Not only can you change things around like this, but you can actually, by going through the different layouts, but you can also, did I have one in here that, I didn't have a saved one, eh? Well, that kind of stinks. Anyway, you can go through and you can grab different panels as well. These are all different panels. Clicking on them, you can drag them. You can tear them off, for example. Like I just tore that off and I put it underneath where I can't get it, underneath my recording software. There we go. You can drag it just like that. You can drag it around. You can pin it somewhere else just by dragging and dropping it. Okay. Let me move this around a bit because I don't like having my hierarchy up here. I like it down here. And I like to have my scene view up here with a bunch of different stuff. My console is fine right there for now. So guys, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the different things that we've got up here. And this is now an entirely different layout. I didn't actually save my own layout. And you can go in here. You can, if something I like, I can simply say save layout, and I can call this Brian's. Oh, you don't know my real name. Kasanis's layout. All right, bam. Forget my real name. Boom. Okay. So now, if I want to, I can come back here and say, oh, use Kasanis's layout whenever I want. Okay. So that's just a quick look at the actual how you can manipulate the screen itself. Let's take a look at some of the different options you've got in here, what we're kind of taking a look at. Right here, currently, in this largest portion that I've got set up here, is called the scene view. And the scene view is basically where you build things. Let me open up a scene so you can see what I'm saying. Open scene. There we go. So in the scene view, you can go through and you can put different things in the location you want. This is basically where you build everything. This is where all of the action takes place, right down here. And you can see that I've got a number of different things in here. This is the game that I currently had that we're actually going to take a look at later on. And this is how you build it. I've got a nice long flow here, and you can use the same Maya controls that you were using if you were used to Maya, using all very similar Maya controls in order to be able to manipulate this camera. Okay, right up here we can see we've got different tools that we can use. This first one is the grab tool. So if I have the grab tool selected, I can move everything around, and I'm simply doing that by using my mouse and my left mouse button, and I'm just dragging it around like that. All right. The next one is the move tool, or the translation tool. Now, if I've got an object selected, let me zoom in on something here. And to zoom in, I can select something and say F, and it automatically zooms in. Same as in Maya, so I'm focusing on that. And I've got this rocket selected. So this is the rocket that you guys saw in the game earlier. If I have the translation tool set up, I can move it about. And you can see I get these manipulator handbars here that I can move it all around. All right, let's go back. ZZ. Control Z to go back. With the rotation tool, same as in Maya, I can rotate. Boop, 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 boop. It's almost all... I'm currently in 2D, and if I wasn't in 2D, I could be in 3D mode, which I am in here. Sorry, I'll show you that right away. This little button allows you to toggle between 2D mode, I was building a 2D game here, and 3D mode, just like that. So you can obviously build 3D and 2D objects within within Unity. Okay, and you can see that I can rotate and I can translate in 3 dimensions. All right. The next tool is the scale tool, and that lets you make things bigger and smaller. Control Z, Control Z. And the last tool is the Rect tool. Now, the Rect tool is a 2D tool, and the Rect tool allows you, it gives you this kind of boxy thing here, and it allows you to move. It's basically for manipulating rectangular objects, things that are based on a rect transform, and we'll talk about what that is in a little bit. But that's basically what it's for. It's a 2D tool, really. So that's basically your tools. Now, you also have the options if you don't want to use. If you don't want to go up here and having to keep click things, I want to move things around and click up here. What you can do is you can still use the same Maya controls in order to move around. So by using my Alt button and you can see if I push my Alt button, it automatically changed over to the hand from translate to hand. And then using my left mouse button, I can move all around. All right, so it's exactly the same tools as you will find in Maya. So if you've watched my Maya tutorials, you're going to be familiar with how the tools are going to move around in here as well. All right, we could also switch between where our pivots are, and we can, whether it's a center pivot or an immediate pivot, or we can switch between global and local space, and that basically changes how your object is being manipulated, whether it's being manipulated around its own like within its own coordinate system or within the global coordinate system. All right, that's what that is. Going all the way across here, we've got our play tools. These are our play tools right here. This again is just above the scene view, and I'm still talking about the scene view here, kind of. Just above here is your play tools. And if I hit the play button, bam, the game itself is going to start up, and it's down here in this game view. It's very loud, so I'm going to turn that off for now. Down inside here is the game view, but if I maximize on play, bam, and push this again, my entire screen becomes the game. And I'll turn it off again because it's so loud. I didn't actually put any kind of volume control within the game itself. All right, so that is the scene view. Gizmos up here allow you to see the different gizmos of the world. All right, so you're going to be able to see the gizmos in 3D, and you're going to be able to see the different things. So these different gizmos that are going to allow you to like what you're going to actually see, whether it's an audio source or a camera, etc. And we can see we've got a camera right there, for example. That's all that the gizmos are going to show. That's good. So that is our scene view. That is our scene view right there. Next to my scene view, right next to this scene view right here, is my inspector. And the inspector, when I click on something, let's say I click on this rocket, Unity is made up of what's called a Unity game, or a game you're building in Unity, is made up of several different things called game objects. And game objects, it's the root of all things in Unity. So anything you create in Unity is a game object. All right. By clicking on the object that you're interested in, so in our case, I clicked on the rocket right here. If I take a look at over here in the inspector will show me the information about that different object. So everything in Unity, every game object is going to have this topmost transform node. This transform node allows you to move it around in 3D space. Well, not everything actually. You know what? Because the HUD actually uses a rect transform, so it's going to actually have some kind of some way of manipulating it in space. But let's go back to our rocket for a minute. So almost every single game object you ever see within Unity is going to have this transform node on top, and that allows us to manipulate it in 3D space, the position, the rotation, and the scale. All right. Additional components might be added to a game object in order to create something new. So in this case, by selecting my rocket, I can see that I have a transform node, and I've got myself something called a sprite renderer. And the sprite renderer is basically what allows me to see the rocket. Okay. If we take a look at a more complex object, so let's take a look at, let's say, the character. Boop. The character, again, has a transform node. We're taking a look at this guy right here. Has a transform node, but you can see there are various other components that have been added to this character in order to make a new object. So what you basically start off with is a game object, and the game object then has components added to it to eventually create other objects you're going to use in your game itself. So in this case here, I've got a number of things. I've got my sprite renderer, so once again we can see the character. We've got a rigid body and a collider, a couple of different colliders here, and both of those are physics objects, and we'll discuss those later on in the actual videos I make concerning this game. So these are different physics objects that allow it to either interact with things or be affected by gravity, etc. We've got an animator, and an animator allows us to make this thing move. And we've got a number of scripts, a player script, a health script, and an audio source that is going to, these scripts all are things that I've written myself that are going to allow me to manipulate the character in some way or do something or act on that object in some way. And lastly, we have an audio source, and the audio source is going to allow me to create sound that comes out of this character. So you can see that there's a big difference between the simple rocket and the more complex character. And like I said, by adding different components to a game object, you can create different, more complex or more simplistic things that you're going to use to build your game. That's what your game is made up of, a number of different game objects. Okay? So, and all of that information can be seen right here in the inspector. If you don't have the inspector, I'm sure you can get it under window. You can find it right there, inspector. All right? And it'll pop up. All right, let's go down here and we're going to take a look at the hierarchy window. The hierarchy window, let's take a look at the project window first. The project window, if you don't have it, again, go under window, find project, bloop, click it. The project window, it shows you everything that you have available to you to build your game. And if we take a look at this right in here, these folders here, these folders are actual folders on my computer. It's a directory structure that's built onto my computer. Unity uses the common directory structure that you use on your computer in order to store information about the game. And I have created a number of different folders within my directory structure to maintain information about this game. So for example, if I take a look at sprites, the sprites folder, all of these sprites are available for me to use in this game. Okay, they are available within the Unity directory on my computer, and therefore they have been read in here. They're under the assets folder of my Unity in Unity on my computer, and therefore they can be used in the game. All right. Whenever I take something and I drag it into the game, it will come over here and appear in the hierarchy. So, for example, let's go to this prefab folder. We'll discuss prefabs later on in much more detail, but basically a prefab is an object that I have created in Unity that I want to use multiple times. So if we take a look right here, there's something called ground, and each of these ones here are a ground. Okay, if I drag this and drop it on there, boom, I've got another ground in place. All right, so prefabs are basically objects that I've created that I say I want to use them multiple times, and therefore I want to save them in a folder, and I want to be able to drag and drop them into place in my game. Okay, we're going to get into that later on. Don't worry about it for now. But you can see when I've dragged and dropped this in from the hierarchy, from the project window, it'll automatically appear somewhere in here, right there, ground number 9. So it's automatically appeared in the hierarchy window. The hierarchy window, unlike the project window is everything you can use in your game. The hierarchy window is everything you have used in your game. So anytime I drag and drop something into here or into the hierarchy window, from the project tab, I drag it and drop it somewhere into the game, it's going to automatically appear here in the hierarchy, meaning it has now been included into the game itself. All right, and I don't want this anymore, so I'm just going to delete it. Boop, it's gone. All right, so that is the hierarchy window. And the hierarchy window is going to go through, you see these little tiny arrows here that go up and down. Those little arrows are showing me the hierarchy of the individual objects. So if I go back again, and let's take a look at our character. Where's our character? Character right here. If we take a look at the character, I did tell you earlier that this character is made up of a number of different components. And that's true. This game object called character has a number of different components on it. However, there's a little tiny arrow here next to character, and if I open that little tiny window, I can see, that little tiny arrow, I can see underneath there are a number of other objects, a ground check and a gun tip. And again, guys, we're going to discuss that in the thing. Don't worry about it for now. But for now, all you have to understand is the hierarchy shows the parent and the child relationship between other game objects. It shows the hierarchy of other game objects. So the character is my parent object, and underneath that, parented beneath that character, is a ground check and another asset called gun tip. Each of these, ground check and gun tip, are additional game objects. All right, and if I click on it, it appears here in the inspector. Gun tip appears here in the inspector. All right, so what else do I have up here right now? I have got the console screen. The console tab will show me anything that's gone wrong, so any kind of errors or warnings you might have, or any kind of debug information that you might have added into your game will appear here in the console. If I've got some kind of error, it'll tell me here what the error is, and I'll be able to go on and check and see what's going on here. So right now this is saying that there's something called player health control movement that's assigned a value that's never used. Whatever, I'll check it out. Everything seems to work. Player health is dead, is assigned but never used. Again, not worried about it. I'll check it out later on. So that is the console screen. All right. It might not be in the same location as mine right now. Go up here, find it. Console. Right there, console. Click on it if it doesn't show up here, and it's going to appear somewhere else. All right. And like I said, you can drag this and you can drop it anywhere you want. It doesn't really matter. If it doesn't look the same as mine, don't worry about it. You can drag it and drop it. All right. Lastly, the screen that I have up here is the game screen right down here, and this is going to give you the view of your actual game. So this is what your game is going to look like. In this situation, it's not going to look exactly like this because what I've got in here is I've got menu systems flopped on top of it right now, but it's going to give you the view of what your game is actually going to look like when it's played. Where's my ability to stretch this? Where is it? Anyway, this is what your game is going to look like when it's played. There we go. Boop. There we go. So this is what's going to show you basically how the game's going to look. You can leave it up all the time. I normally do, just so I can kind of see if I like what it looks like. I leave it small in the corner like this, and it's got a number of different. There's a mute audio. There's a number of different options on here. So if I say mute audio now, and now I play it, we shouldn't get drowned out. Perfect. There we go. Woo, woo, woo. My guy can run. Anyway, this is what it's showing me right here. It's actually showing my game. If maximize on play is not on, when I say play, it's just going to play down here. And we can see what the actual game is going to look like in that location. So that is the screens that I've currently got up. All right, that's the ones I currently have up. Let's turn mute off. I forgot how loud it was. Let's turn mute off for now. So with maximize on play off, it stays small, and maximize on play, it gets big. And you guys can swap between whatever you want on here. The different aspect ratios, you can decide. Let's say you decided earlier that your game is going to only be 16:9, or it's going to be a specific ratio for a very specific thing, like maybe you're building for a very particular phone or whatever. You can set up your aspect ratio here so that it looks like it's going to look. All right. Free means as I stretch it, it's going to stretch as well. So that's basically what it means. And you can really decide, what you want to use. I usually leave it on free, but if you've got a very particular size of game in mind, then make sure that you have got it set up appropriately. All right. So away from what I've already discussed here, away from what we've taken a look at, up here along the top corner we have got our menus. File basically allows you to start new scenes. Unity is made up of a project. And the project is the game itself, and then that project is made up of a number of scenes. The scene might be something simple, like in this case I only have a single scene. Let's see, I think I have it under assets. Yes, I only have a single scene called main scene. Give it a better name than that. That's a crappy name. But main scene basically is my entire thing. But if I had wanted to, I could have had a loading screen, a credits screen, an information screen, like all these different things would be made up of different scenes, for example. You can do it that way. So each one is a different scene. Or maybe each level is a different scene. Maybe you have, the dungeon level is scene 1 and the space level is scene 2. Whatever you want. It basically is made up of a project, so the entire thing, and the number of scenes. All right, so this allows you to create new scenes, open new scenes, build settings. Build settings lets you decide where you're going to build it for. So I've currently got this set up for Mac and Linux, but you have a number of options along here that you can actually build for. Don't get excited when you actually see things like Xbox 360 and Xbox One. I did when I was like, what? Wow, I'm going to start building Xbox games. Well, you can't actually. Currently, you have to actually be an accepted developer in order to be able to compile games for the 360 or the Xbox One or the Vista, the Vita or the PS4. That might change. That all might change actually, because I know Xbox One is supposed to change all of their boxes into developer kits. Maybe they already have, which would be super awesome. Anyway, this allows you to choose the different, what you're doing it for, whether it's for web, iOS, etc., etc. All right, player settings right over here, things like everything, resolution, everything for each individual one of these renderable compilable options. You can set the different things in here. So for PC, I can set the default screen size, etc. You guys can scroll through this and kind of take a look at it if you want to. It also allows me to, for example, right up here, set up my different textures for things like the cursor or the icon for the game, things like that. All right, that's player settings. Down here we've got the build and the build and run, and this is basically will take any of the scenes you've got, and hitting the build button will automatically build your game for you and create an executable game, which will, depending on your options that you've chosen, depending on the platform option you've chosen, will produce various different things that allow it to run on those various different platforms. Build and run does the same thing, build your game into an executable and plays it right away. Okay, boom. Yeah, that's basically this first menu. Edit, like every other edit, allows you to change different things. I'm not going to go through what a paste does because I'm sure you guys can figure that out. Assets allows you to create different things. You can see here that I can create all the different folders and scripts and controllers and everything else that I might possibly need. Game objects, again, allows me to create individual game objects. In here I can either create an empty game object or a child of an existing game object, a particle system, audio systems, anything you kind of want to build is in here. All right, a lot of our 3D objects, etc. You guys can take a look through this as well. Components, again, exactly the same thing. Add-on components. Windows are your various windows that you might be interested in using. We're going to take a look at a lot of these things once we actually get into the game itself. So I'm not going to go over them right now. We're going to get into a lot of these different things. All right, so don't worry about it. For now, click through it. Lastly, help, about Unity, etc., etc. All right. So guys, that is it. That is all I really wanted to show you right now. I'm not going to go further into the interface. I think that's a pretty good start. I think that's probably like a 30-minute video right there. A lot of information coming at you guys, but I wanted everyone to kind of start off on the same page, so we're all kind of working from the same spot. I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and I hope you're going to like this series. I'm really looking forward to it. The main purpose of this series, like I've already mentioned, is for the students at George Brown College. It is a course that I'm teaching, prototyping in 2D. I think that as I teach other courses, I think I might try and put them all up here on YouTube. I'm teaching 2 courses this semester. At the time when I'm making this, I'm teaching 2 courses. I am teaching a prototyping in 2D course, which is basically building this game right here. Let's say mute on audio so you guys can see it while I'm talking. Oh, I didn't maximize on view. Boop. Boop. All right, yeah, so I'm teaching a prototyping in 2D course, which is basically going to teach you how to make this simple platformer. It's an easy little game to understand and to build, and I hope you guys are going to enjoy following along with it. I am also teaching a course on kind of advanced animation, and I might not put that one up immediately, just because I kind of want to do an introduction to animation first. So I might not do YouTube videos on that this semester. I might wait a semester or two to put it up. But the semester after that, I'm teaching another prototyping in 3D, and I'm also teaching an introduction to animation. So maybe you guys will continue to see videos from me. I got hit. So guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you did with a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy it, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. It lets me know. Guys, it lets me know, and I don't mind. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Prototyping 2D in Unity. My name is Kasanas. we've already taken a look at the game we're going to make, and today we're going to jump right into it. We're going to start off by building our first project and taking a look at importing assets. Okay, so let's go right away. If you haven't already done so, please launch Unity. I'm using Unity 5. If you're not, you can use whatever version you want. I can't guarantee it's going to work out exactly the same way. It probably will, but probably not exactly. If you don't have it yet, head on over to Unity and download the latest version. There's a lot of awesome updates in 5 if for some reason you're still afraid to switch over. Alright, so let's take a look at it right now. Once you launch Unity, this is the window you're going to get. This is the startup window. Alright, we are going to start a brand new project, so I'm going to go over here and say New Project. Afterwards, we're going to have to put in the name of our project. I'm going to call mine Simple Platformer. That should be fine. I'm next going to choose the directory that I'm going to save this in. It's very important that you guys choose a directory that you can find, first of all. Make sure you can find this. And make sure you choose a directory or a drive that has enough space in it to add in all of your assets and your builds. Unity is automatically going to create for you a bunch of directories, some directory structure that it's going to use to maintain its files. So make sure you've got enough space on your drive. Okay? Next, we're going to choose whether this is a 3D or a 2D package. And we are, of course, going to make a 2D platformer. So I'm going to choose 2D. There's only a couple of differences, really, between choosing 3D and 2D. In 2D, we have very specific formats that everything comes in. For example, when you bring a texture and it comes in as a sprite, the camera is an orthographic. Anyway, we're going to take a look at all that in a minute. Okay, so make sure you're choosing 2D. It's highlighted red, so the red one is the one that's going to be. All right. Asset packages, we're not going to bring in anything. Later on, when you guys are building your own games, you might want to bring in some existing asset packages, download some, etc. And that's perfectly great. For this one, we're starting off with a clean package, a clean game. All right. Lastly, I'm going to say create project. Boom. And then it launches. It takes a few seconds here. There we go. And we've got ourselves Unity up and running. This is going to be our game. This is going to be our game. Now, if I take a look, let me drag this over for you guys to see. If I take a look at this directory, Unity, Unity K, which is where I said I was going to build it, right there is my simple platformer. It's gone in and built a bunch of different files. Don't touch any of this stuff here. Don't touch any of these directories, all right? Assets right there is the same as this assets right there. So this is a mirrored view. Not even mirrored, it's actually the same. It's just a view of this directory structure, okay? Looking inside, there is nothing in there right now. But if we come over here, we're going to actually be building a bunch of different things. So I'm going to build the directory structure that I like to use right now. You guys don't have to follow this if you don't want to. You guys can have your own method of organization, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm going to go through and build a bunch of different asset folders right now. So with assets selected, I have a couple of choices. With assets selected, I can right-click and say Create Folder. And my new folder, let's call it Animation. All right, boom, and there it is, animation. If I, once again, right-click in here now instead in the asset area, and I say Create Folder, and I say Audio. Boom, there's my audio. All right, and lastly, if I come over here and I'm in Assets still, and I say Create Folder, and I say Materials. Boom, there's my materials folder. Okay, so you can see there's 3 different ways of doing it. Choose however you like to do it, guys. There is a million different ways to do things in Unity. You really have to decide which way you like doing it and then do it that way. All right, so I'm going to build a couple more folders in here, a folder, and I'm going to call this one here Sprites. And I'm going to build another one. I'm going to say Create Folder, and I'm going to call this one here Scripts. And I'll build one more for now, Create Folder, and I'm going to call this Prefab. All right, we're not going to use all of these right now. I just wanted to show you how to build that and how we're going to organize everything. If I take a look at this directory again, the assets directory, you can see that everything was actually built on my computer. And this is where all of your files are going to be organized. Okay? So, let's take a look at the Sprites folder. What I'm going to do, I'm going to open this. There's nothing in there right now. Nothing in here right now, right? It's empty. That's cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to drag in, actually I'm going to copy in a bunch of different images. So I've got in here my Explorer, my background, etc. You can see I've got a bunch of different things in here, and these are the files that I'm going to be using in the game. This might be all of them, I'm not sure. I just grabbed them really quick. You can see they're all PNG files, right? They're all PNG files, meaning that they've got an alpha and everything else associated with them, which is great. I like to use PNG. Anyway, so let's go back here and take a look. I'm going to move this out of the way. Watch what happens when I click on Unity. Bam. Unity says, whoa, something changed here. Hold on. And it's now going to convert all of these images that I brought in into the image file type that it's going to use. If we take a look here in Sprites, double click and open. All right, there we go. We can now see that all of those files that I dragged into the directory are located here as well. Like I said, this is just simply the same directory as we've seen on the computer itself. Let's take a look at these files to see what they are. They were PNGs. They were PNG files. Texture type is now a sprite. In 2D, we are currently in 2D. That is the mode we are in, and we have a 2D game being built. So we set it up as 2D, which is why this is actually in 2D. Anyway, we actually have this game being built, and whenever you bring a PNG file or a TIFF file or anything else, whatever you bring in here, it's automatically going to convert it to the texture type of sprite. It is used for 2D and UI. This could be manually changed if for some reason it came in as a texture. You could go and say, oh, something went wrong, and you could automatically manually change it to a sprite if you want to. But when you bring these things in and you're in 2D design mode, they should come in as a sprite. All right. If we take a look just below that, we have the sprite mode. The sprite mode in this case is single. We have two options, single and multiple. And we're going to take a closer look at multiple in the future. But right now, as a quick explanation, single means that it is a single asset. It is a single self-contained asset, meaning there's only the background. There's only, for example, the rocket or things like that. Okay, there's only the close icon. That's what it's saying. If you say multiple, and you would say multiple for things that had revert, make sure it doesn't change. For things like the 2D Explorer right here, where I've got multiple images in there, or this cannon plant where I've got multiple assets in here that I'm going to build something out of later, you would set that up for multiple. Now we're going to take a closer look at that in the future, so don't worry too much about it right now. All right. The last thing I want to take a look at before we take a look at the camera and building our first asset is the size, max size. You can see that background right here. It's a single asset. It is 2048 by 1024. I want to make sure max size matches the largest of the sizes associated with that file itself. And the reason why I want that is if this was lower than this actual size, the actual size of this file, what would happen is Unity would say, okay, something's not right here. I have to compress this into a very specific size. It would compress it down, and it would cause distortions and everything else in your image. All right, so you'll want to make sure that those things all match. Okay, so once we've got that set up, we can go through and check each one. We're not going to do it right now. We're only going to be working with a few of these at this time. And what I want to do is I want to start to build our environment. I really want to start building our first asset. We're not going to go through and build the platforms yet. We'll save that for the next episode. For now, I just want to show you what's going to happen when we start adding different things to this, to our actual scene right here, to our actual scene. This is the game view, and this is the scene view. Currently in our scene view, the only thing we got is our camera. We've got a camera right here, our main camera. Okay, it is currently set up as this is something I want you to take a look at. Currently set up as a projection type of orthographic. You have two choices, perspective and orthographic. I want to switch this into perspective, and some of you might say, whoa, that's weird. We're doing a 2D game here, and he switched it into perspective. Perspective shows depth. That's what perspective shows. Perspective shows perspective of things, obviously, as the name implies. Orthographic is a flattened image, so you don't really see the depth between things. And we'll take a closer look at that in 1 second. You don't normally see the depth between things whenever you have orthographic set up. All right. This is what it comes in normally in 2D. Let's go over here for a second and take a look. This is the orthographic camera. It shows the orthographic frustum right there, and everything kind of falls in place along that line. The perspective frustum, boom, looks like that, and we're getting perspective angles. Okay, so if you're not actually on the main camera, if you don't actually have it up in there, or you're just looking at it like this, and you can see right away whether it is in perspective or orthographic. Okay, in our case, I want it to be in perspective, and the reason why I want to use perspective is because I'm going to be using the inherent properties of the perspective camera to create my parallax between the background and the midground and the foreground. All right, there's ways of doing it through code, but to be honest, this is just easier. You may have to make a few adjustments to your other assets and where they're placed and everything else, and you actually have to make a few considerations because it's going to now show depth. But this perspective camera is going to allow me to have parallax without any code at all. Okay, so make sure your main camera is in perspective. Now, back to 2D for 1 second. All right, what I want to start off with right now is building our background and our midground. We'll take a look at that. I'll show you how the perspective works and how easy it is without a line of code. I'll show you how easy it is to get everything going. All right, down here we can see the sprites. We already discussed them very briefly. You can ignore this little arrow now. This is just showing, it's actually showing the actual, what the image itself is and where the borders are, etc. and the information as a top node, as a top layer. You can ignore it for now. Just close it up. We don't really care about this additional view. We might care about some of it later on, and we'll take a look at that, but for now, we don't care. All right? There's several different ways to add an image or to add an asset to your game. I can simply take this and I can drag it and drop it in here, or I can take it and drag it and drop it in my hierarchy. And either way, I'm going to end up with, let's zoom in on it a little bit, I'm going to end up with the image the file being in place. It's called background, and I've now got a couple of additional nodes. So originally this thing here only had no real node types, it just had the actual information about the image. By dragging it and dropping it into your hierarchy or into your game, you end up with a couple of different nodes attached. Our transform node, which means it's a standard transform node. I can move this all about, use it with its position, rotation, and its scale. I've also got in here my sprite renderer, which is what is allowing this image to be rendered. Okay? We're going to take a look at a few things in this in 1 second. This right here is my game view and how everything is showing up in the game. Okay. Let's go back to our 3D view for 1 second here. Let's zoom back. So right there, this backwards, that's right, way right there. Right there is our actual image. Now, we're in perspective, as I remember I told you. If I move this thing back and forth, you can see in the actual game view the image moving back and forth on the screen. That is because we have perspective selected. Watch what happens. Let me move this all the way back here. See how nice and small it is. Watch what happens if I move this back into orthographic. Boom. No depth. Okay? Depth is lost. So that's why we had it switched over. Let me switch this back to perspective. Okay, so we are going to use that concept, this ability to make depth, to make the depth matter, to make our parallax. So the first thing I'm going to do, with my image selected, my background selected, I'm going to move this back to, let's say, 100. Okay, it's 100 units away now. Much, much smaller. It no longer is a background. It no longer fills my game view, and that's not exactly what I want. This background is supposed to fill up the entire game view. That's what they are going to see in the background. That's what the people are going to see in the background of the image, all right, of the game itself. So what I want to do is, after I've positioned this many units away, you can choose a number. It doesn't really matter what the number is. It's just to give you parallax. The farther back it goes and the closer it is to the camera will adjust how much parallax we're seeing. I just chose 100 randomly. I want to make sure that this background still fills the entire screen. So I'm going to try scaling this. Let's try 10. Perfect. I only scaled it in X and Y. In 2D, X and Y is our plane of interest. There is no information in scaling in Z because this is a plane. It's a flat plane. So scaling the Z will do nothing. I can make this 1,000 million and it doesn't change anything. All right, so just leave that as 1. Okay, so scaling 10 in the X and the Y makes this thing fill my entire screen in my game view, and that's what I want. It might not even be the right number, but I'm assuming it's okay for now. It looks good. 10. All right. let's look through here. Let's go down a little bit a little bit lower. We've got a sorting layer, and we're going to discuss sorting layers in a short bit. We're not going to discuss them right now. For now, you can leave this on the default sorting layer. But what does that mean? The default sorting layer. The sorting layer is what the renderer uses to determine, like the order in the sorting layer is what the renderer uses to determine what is on top of what. What image goes on top of which image. So when it's putting the background in place, you don't want the background to be drawn over top of the character. You don't want the background to be drawn over top of the enemies, for example, because you'd never see them. So order in layer is an important number here. The smaller this number, so for example, -10, it'll be rendered first, meaning it gets rendered and then everything else gets rendered on top of it. You can make this any number you want. I'm assuming. I have never tried making it 1 gabillion or anything like that, but you can make it -10, for example. Anything that is labeled with the order in layer as -9 will be drawn on top of this. Anything with -8 will be drawn on top of that, and so on and so on and so on. This is my background. I want it to be the farthest from the camera and always drawn in the very, very back. Okay? That's my background. Let's do the exact same thing now with the midground. So the midground, what we're going to use is we're going to use this asset right here, midground. All right? You can once again either drag it and drop it in here, or if I'm in 2D mode, boom, I can drag it and drop it in here. Okay, so there, I did that. Now, the difference you can see between dragging it in the hierarchy view right here and dragging it in here is evident in here in the transform itself. When I dragged and dropped the background in here, everything took place at the origin. It was automatically set at the origin. Dragging it and dropping it onto the actual scene view puts it into kind of a random position. All right, I want this to be at the origin as well. So I can either go in here and I can adjust these numbers and say 0. Or if I want to reset, everything at once, I just closed that by accident. If you want to reset everything at once, you can go to the transform node all the way across this little tiny gear right here, push the button and say reset, and it'll automatically put everything at the origin. Okay? And we can see it at the origin right here in the game as well. Now, I don't want it actually at the depth of 0, because that is where my final platform is probably going to go. My foreground platform is probably going to go. So let's put this partway between 0 and 100. Let's put it at 50 is fine. All right. Now, once again, we've got ourselves a much smaller version. Not exactly what we want. Let's try making it bigger. Let's try making it 3. Is that enough? And 3. Oh, that's not so bad. That's not so bad. And I can move this up and down a little bit later on. Let's make it a little bigger. Let's make it 4. 4 and 4. All right. There we go. So we're going to adjust where these are located in a while once we actually have the position of our platform set and the position of our character set. So we're going to actually drag those around in a little bit. But for now, that is our background and our foreground. We do want to change one more thing. We want to change this sorting layer. And once again, this is going to be the second farthest thing, so I'm going to put it at -9. So my background is at -10. My midground is at -9, which means the midground will always be drawn over top of the foreground. And to clean things up here, I can actually just go through and change the name of this to, instead of background A, background. And I can change this here. Midground is fine. Background and midground. All right, so let's take a look right now at the concept of perspective. And we'll just take a look at this very, very quickly before I end this video. It's actually getting pretty long. It took a lot longer than I thought, so this might take a while to do. Anyway, with the camera itself selected right there and my transform tool selected, take a look at this game. When I go up and down, you can see that the the midground and the background appear to be moving at different rates. And that's parallax. That's exactly what we want. We've got parallax for free without an ounce of code. All it took was changing this to perspective. And like I said, that's going to make a difference in how we do things in the future. But in my opinion, it is an awesome way to get parallax extremely fast and very easily. Alright everyone, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I hope you guys understood it. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to let me know down in the comments. I love answering your questions. I'll do my best to get to your stuff as often as I can. If you enjoyed it, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. I don't care. You guys have your opinion. It's not going to affect whether or not I'm going to make these videos. I am going to make these videos for you. So, thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't already done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this, another episode of 2D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, we did a number of things, actually. We did a fair number of things. It was a longer episode. What we did is we created our first project, and that project is going to hold all the information we need to create our game. We went through and we built ourselves a number of folders, and we built ourselves we imported a number of sprites in order to be able to build the game itself. Some of you guys might have seen this, and I should talk about it right now. There's something in here called main right now. That is called a scene. When I closed this episode down last time, and I closed down Unity, it asked me if I wanted to save the scene. And the answer was yes. So hopefully you guys did that, because I didn't mention it in that last episode. And that's because I'm really rather rusty after being off for almost a year. Anyway, when you close off when you either shut down Unity or you start a new project or whatever you're going to do, it's going to ask you if you want to save your current one. And of course you do. You can give it any name. I just simply called it main. It's going to be my game screen. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but it's going to be my main game screen. So I called it main. So this is the scene now that I'll be working with from this point forward. Okay? Anyway, so in the last episode, we imported our sprites. We discussed sprites and some of the information within here. And we went through and we built our background and our midground objects. We can see them right here. The background is obviously in the back, and the midground is obviously partway backwards. We also discussed the main camera, and we didn't touch too much on this. If you guys are having a hard time seeing some of your stuff, you can reduce the near and the far, or increase the far clipping planes, and that will allow you to see more information around your camera if you're having a problem with that. What we did discuss, however, is the projection type, and we had two options, the orthographic and the perspective. Now, typically when you open up a 2D scene, it opens it up as an orthographic camera, meaning that there's no depth in anything on the scene itself. The entire scene is flat. We went with perspective, and we did that to ensure that we were going to have parallax. As you can see right down there in the game view, we're getting free parallax simply by changing it to perspective camera. And that's going to affect certain things that we do in the near future. In today's episode, we're going to go on and build the foreground, or the platforms that the character is going to run across to be able to traverse the scene and traverse the map. So we're going to build those platforms, and it's really not difficult to do. There actually is a number of things, and we'll go on and we'll continue to build these platforms and make some changes as we add things to our character in the future. But for now, we're going to build ourselves a very simplistic platform. If you go into, as long as you did everything that I did, and you go into your sprites folder, you're going to see something called simple ground. And there's a couple there. There's bridge black, medium ground, and simple ground. I'm just going to take and I'm going to drag this simple ground into my hierarchy view right here. And by doing so, it ended up at the origin, which is where I want it. I'm going to build everything at the origin to make sure everything's working the way I want it to. Okay, so I dragged it into here. If you didn't and you dragged it up into the scene view, you can always go to the transform itself, the transform node, and you can click on the gear and you can say reset, and it'll automatically set your transform to 0. Your position, your rotation, your scales to 1, obviously. So, by dragging this sprite into our scene, just like last week, we ended up with a number of different nodes. We ended up with a transform node allowing us to move this object about our scene. It gives us positional and scaling rotation information in order for us to be able to manipulate this object. We also have our sprite renderer, and our sprite renderer is going to allow us to render this object itself. It renders the sprite. Whatever sprite is located here, in this case simple ground, so it's a reference to the simple ground. Whatever sprite is referenced here, it's going to render that sprite. We also talked about the sorting layer very briefly and the importance of the order in the layer. So, for now, I'm going to put this into let's put it at -1. So, if you remember correctly, our background was located at -10 in the order of the layer. The midground was located at -9, and this one's going to be located at -1, which means this platform now is going to be rendered on top of everything else in the scene. Platform, midground, background will all be rendered in that order, with the foreground being on top. So the first thing I'm going to do change the name. Let's call this long platform. As I mentioned before, we've got ourselves a couple of different options here. We have ourselves the simple ground, which is our longest platform, our medium ground, and our bridge black, which all can be used to make different platforms. Anyway, moving on. What we want to do, in order for our character to be able to, or anything for that matter, to be able to interact with another object. An object in Unity must have a collider in order for the 2D physics, sorry, a 2D collider. In order for the 2D physics engine to be able to say, yes, this is an object that should be interacted with. Okay? So basically what we want to do is we want to add a physics component to this object in order to allow it to be interacted with. And when I say interacted, it means the character can stand on it. That's what my goal is, to make a platform that the character can stand on. Okay? In order to add a component to this object, in order to add a component to the long platform, there's a number of different ways, but the easiest way to do so is to say add component. Click. In doing so, you can see a drop-down menu appears, and you can type into the search engine there. If you are looking for something particular and you can't find it, you can type into the search engine and it'll find it for you. In our case, we're looking for a physics 2D option, so I'm going to go down there and click. Now you can see there's a number of things in here. Rigid body at the top, we're going to take a look at that in a little later lesson. But for now, we're going to take a look at the colliders. There's a circle collider, a box collider, an edge collider, and a polygon collider. Each of these objects allows the asset you're building to be interacted with by other objects with colliders. So, in this situation, I could add either an edge, a polygon, or a box collider and be able to surround this thing fairly neatly. I'm going to use a box collider, and the reason why I did that is because it allows interaction with the sides of this as well as the top. In many platformers, or in a case where you don't want your character to be able to interact with the side, for example, you could have used an edge and it would have just allowed, just along the edge here, just along the top of the platform itself, to be interacted with. In our case, however, I want to use a box collider, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you guys can see it. Adding the collider creates this green box. I'm going to adjust slightly. I want my character, when he steps on here, I want him to sink down a little bit. I want him to sink down to about this black level right here. And I want him to be able to, if he hits the side, I want him to fall off. So if he misses this top part, I want him to be able to fall off. So I'm going to use the offset. As you can see here, we've got ourselves a brand new component called the Box Collider 2D. It has a number of things associated with it. A physics material, which we're going to talk about in a little bit later date. The option as a checkbox to either make it a trigger or to be used by a effector. And we're going to talk about both of those things at a later date as well. But for now, I'm just going to use this offset and this size to make sure this box fits the way I want it to. So I think I'm going to shrink this down to, let's try it at 12. A little bit smaller. Let's try it at 11.8. That looks good. So basically what I wanted to happen is I want our character, if he tries to jump on top, if he misses this top platform, he's going to hit the side and fall off. So that's what I wanted to happen. That's great. I'm also going to adjust the height a little tiny bit. Actually, I'll adjust the size a little bit first. Let's make this into 1.5. Make it a little bit smaller. Maybe a little bit smaller than that. 1.3. And what I want is when the character sits on top of this is probably in a perfect location right here. When the character sits on top of it, I want his feet to come down a little tiny bit. So let's adjust this a little bit more. I'm going to move this down by minus 0.1. 0.05. 0.5. All right, there we go. Now this collider is sitting in such a way when the character is placed on top of it, the collider should allow his feet to sink in if I've designed my character correctly. Okay? This is all we really have to do to create the platform. This is our first platform right here. We're going to be using a number of these things. We're going to be using a number of them throughout our design. So I want to make sure that I can save this as something that I can use over and over and over again. Now that brings us to a concept called prefab. A prefab. Now a prefab is something that you've previously fabricated and you can use by simply dragging it back onto the screen. The prefabs will actually then allow you to manipulate individual objects, so individual instances of the prefab to make something slightly different, or allow you to change all the prefabs at the same time. We're going to take a closer look at prefabs a little bit later on, but we're going to build our first one right now. It's very, very simple to do. I've already created a prefab directory right here. You don't have to call it prefab. You can call it anything you want, as long as you drag this object from the scene itself into a directory like that. So I simply grabbed it, I dragged it, and I dropped it. When I did, it automatically appeared here as long platform. It's got all the same information as I did before over here. I put it in the prefab just so I always know where all my prefabs are. But you could have called that anything you wanted. You could have called it ground and just simply added all your ground layers to that. As long as you take the object from the hierarchy and drag it and drop it into the project view over here into one of the folders, you will have created a prefab. You can see, and hopefully you can see this in the video, I'm not sure if you can see that the main camera, background, and midground are all black. They're shaded black, whereas long platform is shaded blue. That blue shade indicates that it's a prefab. Now, the awesome thing about prefabs, watch this. Let's go back here. I can at any time just get rid of this now. I can delete it. It's gone from my scene. And what I can do is I can go back and I can start to add as many of these as I want to. I'm going to add one there. It's called long platform. I'm going to add a second one right here. Let's drag it over a bit. And there we go. I have got 2 long platforms inside of my game. That's how easy it is to create these platforms. They're not in the right space. I don't really like them where they are. I'm going to select them from here. And I'm going to move them down. Ultimately, we're going to move the camera, so I'm not going to worry too much about this right now. But you'd want it maybe something like that. You can see right there that I've got myself in the game view. I've got myself my stuff set up, and I can move up the background, for example, way up as high as I want. Let's say I want it like that, and I can move up my midground as well, just so I kind of get the view I want. This is showing me what my game is going to look like. That is how you create the platforms themselves. Very simple. You can go through and you can rename these. It's not going to affect it. I can now call this long plat A. Whatever I want, I can call it whatever I want. I can also make changes. You can see if I click on this guy right here, if I take a look at the prefab itself, my transform position is at 0, 0, 0. But if I take a look at long plat A, the transform position has been changed to 7.57, negative 5.21. What that is doing, and you can see how it's dark and it's bold, what that's doing is saying it is overriding some of the values that we've created for our prefab. So you can override the values of your prefab if you want to. I can go through and I can change this thing here so that this is much larger. Let's say I make this into 2, and I make this thing here only 3 long. So I've now changed my collider, so if the character jumped anywhere on here, he would miss the collider. But you can see I've changed this one here, long plat A, has been changed, whereas long platform, the original long platform, has not been. And any other long platform that I drag in is not going to be changed either. You can see that my collider is still the same. Alright, so that is how a prefab works. It's a very, very powerful tool that allows you to very quickly add things to your scene over and over and over again. It's ideal for things like this platform. Ideal. Alright, one more thing we're going to take a look at really quickly. I'm going to add one more foreground element, and it's just a review of last episode where we created ourselves an asset that had nothing other than the transform and the sprite renderer. What I am going to do is I'm going to go back to my sprites. I'm going to find my rocket right here, and I'm going to drag it and drop it onto the scene. This is going to be my character's rocket, and this character he's not in here yet, so I don't really have a frame of reference, but I'm going to scale this up to, let's say, 4 and 4. Let's see if that's any good. 4 and 4, and that is going to be my rocket ship sitting in the foreground right there. That's going to be my character's starting location. He came out of that rocket and he flew away. The rocket itself simply dragged and dropped on. I'm going to add it to the, let's add it to the -7, so it's actually going to be rendered in front of the midground but behind the foreground. I'm going to put it at -7, and I'm not going to do anything else to it. As you can see, once again, I've created myself the rocket. The rocket's there. It's simply decoration. And I did so now so we can see, if I go back to my main camera and we move everything around here, we can see we've got really, really nice movement in the background, the foreground, and the midground. Everything is moving as we expect it to. All right, and I put the rocket in place just to kind of say this is where your character starts. Okay, everyone, I hope that was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. It's very, very easy to do. I'd like you guys to take a few minutes and build yourselves a couple platforms of your own. Go in and build additional platforms. Build yourself a black bridge and build yourself a medium ground platform. Build them both so that you can add them to the scene. Make yourself a couple of prefabs, and then you've got yourself the ability right there to be able to start adding the entire layout of your game into place. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I hope it was informative for you. If you liked it, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, that's perfectly fine. Let me know with a thumbs down. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 2D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, we built ourselves this platform right here, the long platform. It is the main structure we're going to be using to build our maps and our levels in this game. So hopefully you guys followed along, and hopefully you did what I asked you to do, and that is go through and build at least 2 more. I built these 2. I built the short platform and this black bridge right here, and they're already set up down here as prefabs, so I'm ready to actually go through and start building a very simplistic level. I can add more or less, or I can add more things if I want to, and I probably will, but these 3 things are going to give me a good, solid backbone to build this really simple platformer. I'm really hoping you guys are following along and doing this as I do it as well, and doing the extra stuff I'm asking you to do. If you do, I can promise you guys when you're done, you're going to have yourself a decent little game here that you can use to build on. All right? It's not going to be a game anyone wants to buy, but all the concepts here are going to be very important for you to be able to build a game itself, like a really good game. All right? In today's episode, guys, we are going to start looking at building our character, and this is some of the really fun stuff. You want to see things moving around, and we're going to take a look at that today. All right, we're going to start off in this episode here by looking at the animation, building the character, building the actual asset of the character, and taking a look at some of the animation. All right, let's get started. All right, guys, to start off with, it is not going to be too difficult. What we got to do is we got to go to our sprites folder, and I want you to locate your character. In my case, I am using this 2D Explorer that I created. It is a really simple sprite sheet. I actually only used very, very, very basic, the extreme lowest number I could in order to get animation out of this. You can find some much more complex ones or build more complex ones for yourself. I went simple here just because for time and to make sure everything was simple for you guys to see. We did talk about sprites a little bit in one of the other episodes. I talked about the fact that the sprite mode, in a case where you only have a single asset, such as this background or this bridge or the rocket, when you only have a single asset contained within that file, you want to leave the sprite mode set to single. However, when you have multiple assets or animation, and you want to divide this up and you want to tell Unity where the different images are in that screen, so for example in the Explorer or this plant or this creature animation or this part explosion, whatever, you want to make sure that the sprite mode is set to multiple. Now after that, what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that Unity understands how it's going to be split up, where the actual images are. And to do that, you go to the sprite editor, the little button right here, click it, and it's going to launch a new window. Now we can see in this section here, like I said, very, very simplistic. The first 4 of these is my idle, the next 5 of these is the run, and the last 3 is the jump. Very, very simple stuff here. I did not do anything complicated at all. I kept it as basic and simple as I could. That's probably the least number of actual frames I could have used to do everything. But anyway, I have to tell Unity how to divide this up now. So to do that, you've got the option over here called Slice. And if I click on it, I have a couple of different options. Automatic. Let's see what happens if I do automatic. Slice, boom. What it did is it automatically found each of the images I had in here and said, oh, here's something, and it put a box around it. In some situations, such as the cannon plant, you might want to do that. That is a perfectly good way of doing it. It's going to break up your images, and it's going to say, okay, here's all the different assets, and break up the assets. However, in the case of a sprite sheet, an animated sprite sheet, we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that each of these sections are pretty much the same. Otherwise, the center of gravity of your character is going to shift, and your character is going to move back and forth, back and forth. It's not going to look good at all. All right, so we have another option here. If I go to slice, and instead of saying automatic, I say grid. It's going to ask me what the grid is. Now I know, because I made this, that my grid is 100 by 100. And I'm going to slice. Boom. And you can see now that each of these sections, each of my little dudes here is sliced up nice and neat and inside of that little box. This is going to mean, as long as your artist has done things properly, that this object, the center of mass of this object is going to remain the same. And if it doesn't, you'll see it right away, because what will happen is you'll start the animation and everything will shift back and forth. It'll move about, or it'll jiggle, or shake, or whatever. And you don't want to see that. So you want to make sure to get yourself a sprite sheet that is created properly. In my case, it is a 100 by 100 grid, and I can see that my character is falling in here very nicely. When I'm done, I'm going to say apply. Boop. Just like that. And I can now shut this down because I don't need anything else over here. Bam. Sprite editor, shut. The window's up there. I can't shut it. Close tab. Okay, good. Sorry. My recording software was blocking it. Anyway, guys, so that's how you close it off. Make sure it's gone. Now what we do, if you take a look at this little arrow now, and I extend this little arrow, I have got a bunch of different assets within here. Each of those slices, each of those grid units has become an individual object. Okay? In order to build my character, I'm going to grab the first one. I know that 1, 2, 3, 4, that's my idle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is my run, and 1, 2, 3 is my jump. All right? I'm going to grab the first thing here, my idle, and I'm just going to drag it, and I'm going to drop it on here. Okay? When I do, that's my little guy right there. When I do, I end up with something down here, and I'm going to change the name of this right away to character. Boom. I end up with the character. Now, this is what it's going to look like. It's a little bit small. Let's make it 2 times as big and 2 times as tall. That's pretty good. You might have to do that with yours. I don't know. It's going to be up to you. I'm immediately going to see right away I've got a transform node. I want to reset this to 0. Well, I don't want to do that now because I actually already changed the scale. I want to put this at 0 and this at 0. So I'm starting off at the origin. Perfect. We have got our transform node and our sprite renderer. I'm going to put this on layer 10. You guys can put it in anywhere you want. I just want this character to be on top of everything else. So I put it on a number that's way up there, and that is great. All right. A couple other things I'm going to do right away with this character. I'm going to say tag, and I'm going to look through here, and I'm going to find, player. Now, some of these are already built. You can add your own by saying add, and you can build more tags. You can just say plus, and you can add different things. Like, let's say I want to make an enemy tag, for example. And when I go back now to tags, when I go back to this character now, and I say tag, I can see the enemy is added. This is giving me my player. I'm going to use the tag later on to find this player or to do things to it. Tags are a good way of organizing your game and allowing other objects to immediately identify different things about this. So I know anything with the tag player is actually a player character and not an enemy, for example. We'll get more into that a little bit later on. Okay, so now I've got myself a transform node and a sprite renderer. There's a few more things we need to do to make this into a real character. Right now, if I start playing the game, nothing's going to happen. Watch play. The game's going to start. Nothing happens. Nothing moves. What we want to happen is we want this character to be affected by physics. We want the physics engine to hold this guy down. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to say add component. We're going to go to 2D physics, and we're going to add a 2D rigid body. Now, boop. Now I've got this in place. You can add different things in here. You can say how much it weighs, how much linear drag, so how much friction and everything is on it, how much angular drag, how much gravity affects that. We haven't discussed gravity yet, but we will. Whether or not this character is on a fixed angle, so can it rotate? Nope, I don't want it to. I want it to stay in this aligned position. I don't want it to rotate around its base or anything like that. Is kinematic basically means that this is, if it is kinematic, means it's not a moving piece. This is not an is kinematic, so I'm going to leave that undone. This is actually a moving character. All right? Everything else here you can kind of leave as it is. We're not going to worry about that. Watch what happens now when I say go. Moo! My character fell off the screen. Good, we're being affected by gravity. Bad, the character is falling off the screen. So, we have to add a few more things. We already talked about the fact that a 2D collider, 2D colliders are what's used to make sure that two objects in a scene can interact. We know that our platform has a 2D collider. If I take a look at it, right there, we added it. We added a box collider last time. If I go to the character itself, I can go in here and I can add an additional collider. I'm going to say, I'm going to add a little tiny circle collider. Now that one's pretty big. We're not going to actually add that one. The reason why I chose a circle collider, first of all, let me just change this so it's the appropriate size. Let's try 0.2, maybe 0.15. That should be all right. Maybe 0.2. Maybe 0.2, just like that. And I'm going to move it more in line with his legs. I'm going to move the Y so it's down like that. I want it to align with his feet. I'm going to move it backwards a little tiny bit so it's more in the center of his mass. So that looks perfect. I like where that circle collider is. So let's see what happens now if I hit play. Boom. Our character falls down. You know what? I'm going to turn on maximize on play so you guys can see it. Our character falls down and he's automatically touching the ground. This is exactly what we wanted to happen. The two colliders are interacting. We've got a rigid body that drags our character down with gravity, and we've got ourselves two colliders that are coming together, and the two colliders don't pass through each other. Neither of them are set to a trigger, so therefore these create a barrier that the other collider can't pass. Okay, let's take a look at it actually in the screen here. Play. Boom, he falls down, and if I highlight both of these, the long platform, my character, you can see that this circle collider is resting right up against the box collider of the platform. Exactly what we want. Okay, so that's great. That's great. Our character cannot go through that barrier, but without an additional collider, right now he's only colliding right here. Now the reason why I use a circle collider, let me go over that as well. The reason I use a circle collider is, instead of a box collider, which you could have done, is this circle collider will allow him to go up a ramp, for example, or hit something and kind of roll over it. If I'd used a box collider there and had a hard edge coming down, this character could have pressed up against another like bump or something and not been able to pass. Okay, so I used a circle collider at his feet. Now, I want to define the remainder of this character, the remainder of his hitbox, using an additional collider. What I'm going to do, exactly the same way, I'm going to go on and I'm going to say add component. I'm going to add a physics 2D, a box collider. Now that's too big. What I want to basically do is I want to add collision to his upper body in case, let's say, an enemy shoots at him or he hits his head on a wall or who knows what, right? He has to duck down in an area to get through. We want to define this additional area right up here, his head and his arms or whatever else you want, so that it can collide with things as well. So I'm going to add this additional box collider. It is far too big, so let's say 0.3. That looks pretty good. And let's say 0.3. That's too small. It doesn't have to be a square. It is just a box collider. Let's say 0.5. And let's adjust this so that looks pretty good. And adjust it back and forth, back and forth. That's not quite wide enough. Let's make this in a 0.4. 3.5. Now, I'm being a little bit exact here, and let me tell you why. And let's move this to 5. 2. Just 2. I know, guys, I'm being a little anal. Sometimes I am. Now, listen, the reason why I did that, the reason why I made sure of that these things here were all aligned properly. If I had made, let me just do this quick, remember 3.5. Let's say I had made this 0.5 instead. You see how the edges are sticking out here? There's a corner here and there's a corner here. Theoretically, as I was playing this game, that edge could get caught on something, and I don't want that to happen. I want to make sure, I think this was 0.35, right? Yeah. I want to make sure that there is a nice uniform front, a nice perimeter all around this character, all the way around, just like that, to make sure that nothing can get caught. If he fell off the edge of a platform, let's say a hard edge like this one here, and he kind of got caught on there because his box collider was too wide, he could get stuck and not be able to fall off. I want to make sure that doesn't happen. What I basically want to do is I want to make sure that this cube, This box collider I added was large enough to define his body region. It basically creates a hitbox for me. Now enemies can shoot at him, they can shoot him in the head, they can shoot him in the legs, they can shoot him in a variety of different locations, okay? If you want to, you could have increased the size, the radius of this circle collider if you had desired, and you could have added a larger box collider to make sure that his arms and everything were going to collide with stuff. But you know what? I'm not really too worried about that. As long as this character is able to be hit by things and hits things with its main body, this is a pretty good hitbox area. Okay? So, that is all you really need to add in order to define this character physically in this world. We're going to go through in the next episode and add our animation. Alright, for now though guys, I'm going to cut it off right there. I've already gone 15 minutes or so, and I want to make sure these episodes are short enough and only have enough information that you're able to follow along and do it little bits at a time. I'll make sure I upload all the videos for a particular week at the same time, so you guys can work on it over the week, but I'm not going to dump too much information onto you. Alright, so for now guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, let me know down below with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs up is perfectly fine. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I don't care. Thumbs down is perfectly fine. If you've got something to ask or you want to know something, ask it down below in the comments. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have a nice day, everyone. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of 2D prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, we built ourselves the character, the actual asset, the character. And it was very simplistic to do. We added in an image, and to that image we added in a 2D rigid body that allows Unity's 2D physics engine to react upon that body itself. We also added in several different colliders, and those colliders define the character's hitbox and allow the character to interact with other 2D colliders in the scene. So, for example, our character can stand on top of our platforms, which is really, really great. That's what we're trying to do. In this episode, guys, I'd like to take a look at building some of the animation for this character. We're going to take a look at the idle and the walking animation. And then in the next episode, we're going to take a look at adding the code to actually be able to make the character walk. Alright, so let's get started. Adding animation to a character is really rather simplistic. Basically, you have to have yourself your character animation sheet, which I've got right here. It's my 2D Explorer. Hopefully, you guys got one of your own, either the 2D Explorer or maybe you've got yourself something you've downloaded. Basically, what you have to know is where each of the animations start and where they end. So, for example, in my case, I have 3 separate animations within my character sprite sheet. I've got an idle that goes from 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I've got a run that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I've got a jump that's 1, 2, 3. Today we're going to take a look at the idle and the run. So to add an animation to an existing character is very, very simplistic in 2D. Basically what you have to do is click and highlight. I'm going to actually only click and highlight the first, well, the 4 actually, all 4. So the first 4 frames. And once they're clicked and highlighted, I'm going to drag and drop them on the character itself. Now watch what happens. Boom. An additional window opens. Now this additional window is asking me, saying, hey, what are you doing here? You're adding something to me and I don't know what it is. I think it's an animation. You can see it's being saved as type anim. So what I'm going to do, and I got this in the wrong spot, I wanted it somewhere else, but whatever, I'm going to give this thing a brand new name. And I'm going to call this thing here, let's call it player, spelled properly, player idle, because this is my idle animation, and I'm going to save it. When I do, unfortunately, it's going to show up right here. There's a couple of things that showed up inside of here, and I'm going to move these right here. This character, this thing called character, and this player idle. I'm going to take both of those, and I'm going to add them to my animation folder. If I had been smart in doing this properly, what I would have done is made sure I clicked on animation before I actually did that. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so, animation. Inside of my animation folder now, I've got something called character, and I've got something called player idle. Let's take a look at how that actually affected our character asset. I'm going to click on him right here. If we take a look, we scroll all the way down. On the bottom now, underneath everything else we added on the last episode, we've got a new thing called animator, a new node called animator. And basically it says controller, and it says character. That is this right here. This is called an animation controller, is what this is. The animation controller, watch what happens if I double click on it. It's going to open up, if you don't already have it, it's going to open up a window. I already had it in place here, tabbed in. It's going to open up the animator window. The animator window is the location where you're going to build basically a map of what goes into what, meaning can my player go from idle to run to jump to walk, and how it goes there and what causes it to switch. This is the mechanism, basically the mechanism concept, and it's used in a lot of different software packages, not just Unity. There's a lot of different ones that actually use this similar idea where the animator is the one who's controlling what switches and how. Basically, what I'm going to do is currently I have an idle. Now watch what that means actually. Let's take a look right now. Let's go back to my scene. I'm going to make sure maximize on play is on, and watch what happens when I hit play. When I hit play, boom, my character comes in, and he has got some motion. Now, he didn't have any motion previously, and he doesn't have a great motion going on there, but he's got some motion, and that is my idle. All right, that is my idle. If we go back to this screen here and we take a look at this, this is basically saying it's orange, and the orange node, player idle, is the first thing, it's the default motion that the character is going to have on him. He's got this default animation on him. Player idle is the actual frames that we dragged and dropped onto character. It contains all three of those frames, or sorry, all four of those frames, and it's scrolling through them one after the other. And currently, if we take a look, if I click on it, I take a look, it's got loop time, which means it's a looped pose. That's looped, and means it's going to play over and over and over again. Okay, so that's what I want to happen with my idle. My idle is a loop, meaning it's not just something that plays once and stops. It's playing over and over and over again. It restarts. Okay, so we've got ourselves a loop in there. Now we've got ourselves a couple of problems. That animation, let's take a look at it again, is very, very fast. Very fast. Now, that is because I actually only included 4 frames. I didn't want that. I should have included many more frames than I actually did. You can add in as many as you want, and it's going to go through and scroll through each one of those frames. All right, with so few frames, I'm going to have to change this motion down. Let's slow it down, and let's try it at 25% speed. 25% speed. Let's see how that looks. That's not bad. It's fine. I'm going to leave it at 25% speed for the remainder of this episode anyway, and I'll tweak it later on and see if I like it. But right now, at least, the character's not like jerking up and down. Okay, it's going through a nice slow motion. It's not great animation, and I'm not claiming it is. Like I said, I did it all in 4 frames. Take your time, guys. Make yourself some good animation so your game looks good. All right, that is my idle. Great. The next thing I want to do is I want to take a look at the run. If I want to add a run to this character, I can do it really simply. I'm going to go back to my sprites. I'm going to highlight the run in exactly the same way. This time I'm going to leave the last frame out because the last frame is actually a repeat of the first frame, and I don't want to use it, so I'm just going to grab these 4, and I'm going to drag them, and I'm going to drop them on character. Once again, I've got a window saying, "Hello, what is that?" And I'm going to say this is called player run. And when I do so, boom, you can see it shows up right here in this location. All right? This time it's grayed out though. This time it's grayed out, and that means it is not the default. So default means when it's orange, whichever one is orange means this is what I want you to play whenever I start. This is what my default state is. I start off in this state. We can go between other states if we want to by adding what's called a transition, and we're going to do that in 1 second. So right now, if I want to check out the player run, let's say I wanted this one here to be default instead. Whenever the character comes in, he's running. I can simply click on it to make sure it's highlighted. I can right click, and I can say set as layer default. Boom. And when I do, it becomes orange. Now, watch what happens when I hit play. This guy goes in, he's running like hell. Oh my god, he's running so fast. That's a little too quick. So once again, what we're going to do, guys, we're going to go in here. We're going to change this. We're going to make sure, first of all, as you can see, it looped. So if I go into here, where is it? Right here. I'm going to drag this over again. If I go into here and I take a look at player run, you can see it's looping, so that's what I like. And there's no cycle offset, and that's because it's going all the way around through the entire thing. That's great. If I go back to the character himself right here, and I look at player run and click on it, let's slow this to, let's say 0.5. This is just a guess. Just a guess. That's not so bad. That's not so bad as far as the run is concerned. And again, we can tweak that once we've got our motion in place, once this character can actually move forward or backward with keystrokes. So for now, I'm going to leave it like that. You can see that his current state now, because I went back and I reset his run as the default state, he is currently running all the time. And that's what we wanted to do. All right, let me stop that. Now, we're going to take a look at transitioning between these two states. Transitioning between two states is rather simple. It's really simple using Mechanim anyway. So first thing I want to do is choose which one is my default state. I'm going to actually go back and choose idle as my default state, meaning when the character is doing nothing at all, I want it to go back into this idle animation and stay there until I actually do something. Transitioning from one state to the other is done through different parameters that are offered to these states. And let me show you what that means. So I'm going to click on idle. I'm going to right click on it and make this little window come up, and I'm going to say make transition. And I'm going to drag and I'm going to drop it right there. And then I'm going to select run, the player run. I'm going to right click, make transition, and drag it over there. So you can see that in doing so, I've got arrows that go back and forth. And basically what I want to do is I want to define parameters that say whenever something happens, go from this state to this state. And whenever something happens, go from this state to this state. In order to do that, I have to set up certain parameters like I've been saying over and over again. To do so, right over here on this window on the side, you can click the plus sign. Now you've got a couple of different options: float, integer, bool, and trigger. Float is any number, 1.25 or whatever you want. Integer is any whole number. A bool is a true or a false. And lastly, trigger. A trigger is an interesting one because what happens with the trigger is it operates and it stays in that state. So unlike a bool where it goes true, where you say true and then it'll stay true until you say false, a trigger will go, if you make a trigger true, it goes trigger once, it says true, and then it goes false again. So it's always ready to go. It's kind of like a burst. Okay? Think of it like that. What we want to do to transfer from player idle to player run is we want to make a float. I'm going to click on float. And I'm going to call this speed. Now it's going to be very important that you guys remember this name, speed. Call it something that you can remember. What we're going to basically do is we're going to say, given speed, whenever speed is a given value, so let's say the character speed goes from 0 to let's say, let's say 0.1 for now, or 0.01. Whenever speed, you can see it took this parameter, and all I basically did is I clicked on here, I clicked on the transition itself. Underneath here, well, let's look at this side because I already clicked it. Underneath here, there's an empty list, and when you click the plus sign, boop, it ends up like that. Okay, it's going to fill in this condition. There's going to be a drop-down menu here, and it's going to give you an option of any of the parameters you currently have available. We only have speed. So whenever our speed, so meaning the character's speed, he's moving in some direction, is greater than, and you can choose greater than or less than here, whenever it's greater than, and I'm going to say decimal 0.001, I might as well make it really small, that's too small, decimal 0.1, whenever his speed is greater than decimal 0.1, I want him to go from idle to running. So he's basically going to move from idle to running whenever this parameter is greater than decimal 1. And we're going to take a look at how we change that parameter in code later on, okay, in a future episode. In this episode, we're just doing this map. Now, the other thing we want to do is we want to go from player run, so the player's going to be idling. He starts to speed up, he's moving somewhere, and as he speeds up, it's going to transfer along this transition here into this animation where it's going to loop as long as this condition has been passed and as long as we don't reach this condition. In this condition, I'm going to say plus speed is less than decimal 0.1. So if our speed is less than decimal 0.1, it's going to go back to idle. So if he starts to speed up, he's going to start to run. If he starts to slow down, he's going to go back to idle. That's basically what this is. We are creating a roadmap, an animation roadmap. All right, that's basically what we're doing here, creating an animation roadmap. And the animator is the one who's in charge of this. That's what's really interesting, because the animator has gone through and he's made great efforts in making his animation look the way he wants to look. And now he's going to tell the coder, he's going to say, listen, the animation's set up the way I like it. I built you this roadmap, and all you have to do now is pass in these parameters, and everything is going to work the way I have designed it to look. And that's really, really great. That's a really great move as far as the animators are concerned. I worked at a studio before. We didn't actually have this, where basically as an animator, I made my animation and I passed my animations off to a coder, and the coder tried to put them together the way he thought they should work. And that didn't work out well. There was a lot of back and forth, and you know, no, you're doing it wrong, and it just didn't work out well. This puts a lot of power in the hands of the artist, and because the artist really knows how he wants the different things to look. The coder is still in charge of when everything happens, because he's the one who passes in, he or she, sorry, is the one who passes in these different parameters and affects when these things occur, but the animator or the artist is in charge of how they look when they occur, and that is awesome. There's a couple more things we're going to look at right now. Right here, if we take a look at this, this shows how they go from one location to the next, how it actually moves transitions from one state to the other. And I usually try and make these nice and small. You can have a longer transition if you'd like to. A longer transition will mean that it'll like transition slowly, so you can kind of blend them into a nice smooth blend rather than having them happen all at once. Especially in 2D, I like to scrunch this down to really, really small, so it's a switch. The character's idle and then he's not. He's idle then he's not. You know, he's running and then he's not running. I like to do that, and I'm going to do it for both right now. I'm just going to squash them down like this. Squish. So they're really small. And we can go through and we can adjust that a little bit later on. And these are all interruptible. So basically that means that at any point when our speed is less than 0.01, it's going to switch over. That's what that basically means. And you can drag this, like I can drag this right to the front if I want, like that. You know, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to leave it like that for now. That is my transitions, okay? And if we want to test it, let's get rid of maximize on play for a minute. All we have to do is, now with maximize on play turned off, hit play. Oh, shoot. Make sure scene is up. Taking a look at this, we can see that the character is moving as we expected. Got it back to my animator. I can adjust this value here. So let's make this into 0.2. Now watch what happens to the character. 0.2. You can see now that character is running. All right. If I put this back to 0, now the character is idle. Okay. Did you see him switch? Watch right here. I'm going to do it one more time. So with it playing, it's on 0, the character's idling, and I'm going to make this into 0.03. Boom, our character is running, and when I'm done, back to 0. All right, that is basically how that works. That is basically the concept behind the animation tools within Unity. They're extremely powerful, and they give a lot of power to the animator as well as a lot of power to the coder. That allows them to work hand in hand together. Okay, in the next episode, we're going to take a look at writing the code to make sure our character can move back and forth. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I think we're probably around 15 or 20 minutes again. We're getting kind of long. I want to make sure we're not too long. So I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you did, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. I don't care. Give me a thumbs down if you want to. I am doing this to help you guys out. And if I'm not helping you, then you have to let me know. All right? Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions or you'd like to say anything. Let me know down in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. I love answering your questions. All right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this, another episode of 2D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kisanas. In the last episode, we took a look at creating animations for our character. Right here in our character, we've got ourselves several different animations. We've got ourselves a player idle and a player run. We also set up the transitions between those two states using a parameter called speed, a float parameter called speed. In today's episode, I'd like to take a look at the code required to actually be able to switch between player idle and player run and back again, as well as make our character move back and forth across the screen. It's not going to be difficult. I know some of you are a little bit frightened of code. You say, oh, no code, I don't want to do code at all. You know what? It's not going to be a lot of code. I promise there's only a handful of lines for you to be able to make this character move around, and doing so is going to make you feel really great. You're going to say, wow, I'm on my way to making a game. You really are. Okay, so let's get started right now. So to start with, all you have to do is make sure, let's go into scene view. Let's make sure our character is selected. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding additional components to this character. We're going to be adding a script to this character. And that script is going to be responsible for a lot of things that are actually going to be happening to the character. Running, jumping, falling, shooting, everything like that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go with our character selected and with our scripts folder selected. We're going to say add component. Oops, I hovered over there for too long. Add component, and we're going to say new script. What we're going to do here, right away, we're going to see a new script behavior. Make sure you type in there the name, player controller. You want to make sure you get this right the first time, because changing it can screw things up if you don't change it in a couple locations. I'm not going to tell you about that right now, because you might just do it. Player controller. What I want to make sure that you guys are in C#. We're going to be using C# for this entire series. I prefer C# to the other options. The other options, of course, being JavaScript and Boo, I think, still is available. I like C#. It's a very strong language. I think a lot of people are moving towards C# for Unity if they're still doing scripting languages rather than down dirty coding like C++. But using C# is awesome. So that's what we're going to be using for this entire series. All right. Once you've got the name typed in there, player controller, then say create and add. Boom. What's going to happen is we're going to get a brand new node added to our character. That node, well, the script apparently showed up in assets. I'm going to drag it and drop it in scripts. Boom. That new node is called is the player controller script, and the only thing you're going to see in there right now is a reference to the actual script itself. Double clicking on it is going to open up MonoDevelop. MonoDevelop is the that didn't come out right, did it? Why is this? I must have torn that off. That's weird. There we go. Just a graphical error. Anyway, guys, MonoDevelop is the scripting editor that comes with Unity. It is a good scripting editor. I like it. I have no problems with it. Some people say they don't really like it, and you know what? If you don't, that's fine. You guys can use anything you want to use to write your scripts. I'm going to be using MonoDevelop. It's free and it comes with Unity. Free is awesome. So, right up here, we can see right away that we've got ourselves two functions available to us right now. We've got our start and our update. And we're gonna change these around in a little bit. The first thing we're gonna do. These are movement variables. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a couple of variables in here so that so that we can actually manipulate things either publicly or get reference to things that are currently on our character. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a public. And public means that if something is declared as a public, if a variable is declared as public, then it's going to be available to us over here in the inspector. Okay, it'll be available in the inspector. We'll be able to change it as we move forward without having to go through and change the script over and over again. And I'll show you what that means in 1 second. We're going to declare a public float that we're going to call max speed. Now, max speed is just as the name implies, the maximum speed that the character can move at. So by changing this, a lower value obviously makes the player move slower than a higher value. So if I put in a value of 1 or a value of 5, obviously 5 will move faster. And we're going to use this and tweak it. We made it public so that we can tweak it later on and get the right motion from our character. Okay? So that is our first variable. We're going to declare a couple of private variables here. And you don't have to explicitly write private. You can just start naming them. Rigid body 2D. And I'm going to call this my RB. What this is it is a reference to the rigid body that's located on the character. If you remember correctly, when we first built this character asset, one of the first things we added was a rigid body. Our character is a physics object. It has a rigid body, and what we want to do is we want to have a reference to that rigid body in order to be able to manipulate it in some way. We're going to manipulate the rigid body directly either by adding forces or by changing the velocity or something like that in order to get our character to move about the screen. So this is going to be a reference to the rigid body. Okay. The next thing we're going to add is a reference to our animator, and we'll call it, let's call it my anim, I guess is fine. We are going to have a reference to our animator, and that is going to allow us to change if we go to our animator, it's going to allow us to change the parameters that we have listed here. Currently only speed. So what we're going to be able to do is manipulate speed in order to change these things here. Therefore, we need a reference to the animator itself. Okay? That's what those things are for. Now, we're going to go down here into the start menu, into the start function, which has been provided for us. And what I want to do is I want to initialize both my RB and my anim. Okay, and we're going to use the same technique to do both. We're going to say my RB is equal to get component. I'm not even going to type it because I'm so lazy. Get component. And basically what the get component does is it looks at the asset that this script is located on. It's gonna look at, through the asset that this script is located on, and it's going to try and find whatever it is I'm looking for. In this case, my RB is a rigid body 2D. So it's going to be looking for our rigid body 2D. It's going to return a reference from this get component and store it here in my variable my RB. Okay? I'm going to do exactly the same thing with my anim, and I'm going to say is equal to get component. Okay, and I had a whole bunch of options there. I had get component and parent, get component and children, etc. Get component means it's located on the asset that I'm currently stored on as well. So get component, and this is going to be an animator. All right, this is going to return a reference to our animator and store it in my anim, and therefore we can directly manipulate now my anim. All right, now the next thing I want to do is I want to take a look and see if our player has gone through and added input into our game. So did the player click a button? Did the player push the arrow keys? Did they push a mouse button, etc.? We want to take a look at that. Okay. Now, because we've got ourselves a rigid body on our asset, this is a rigid body means that this is now a physics object. It means it can be affected by the physics engine. Now, update and fixed update are two options in order to be able to determine whether or not a player has pushed a button, whether input has been added into the game. We want to do our stuff in fixed update, and the reason why update is called on after every single frame. After every single frame, regardless of how long that frame took to actually work. Fixed update is called after a specific amount of time all the time. It's exact. It'll always be called at, let's say, 0.1 milliseconds. It'll always be called at a specific amount of time, after a specific amount of time. So the fixed update difference, the differential between those two fixed updates is always exactly the same. In order to get physics engines working properly, in order to make sure that the physics objects are actually working properly, you want to manipulate them within the fixed update rather than the update. Okay, because the physics engine operates after each fixed update. After each time fixed update is called, the physics engine will actually operate on the actual physics object. Okay, so fixed update, excuse me. What we want to do in fixed update is we want to determine whether or not our player has actually pushed a button of some kind. And what we're going to do is we're going to check what's called the axes. Okay, so here, let's just start the code off before I show you what an axis is. So basically what we want to do is we want to declare a new variable, float move. And move is going to be equal to input, right there, dot, get axes. You have a choice here, get raw axes and get axes. Get axes, what that basically does is it will return a value between -1 and 1. So any like 0.25454, whatever. Get raw axes will only, or get axes raw will only return a value of -1, 0, or 1. Okay? We want to know everything in between. We're going to be using that. We're going to be using everything in between, so we're going to use get axes. Now, what is an axis? An axis is a predefined value. Let me close this off for a second. A predefined value here in project settings input. A predefined value inside of Unity. So Unity has a number of axes. We can see that there's 18 in total that are already defined for you. Horizontal, vertical, Fire 1, Fire 2, Fire 3. Each one of these things here, let's take a look at horizontal because that's what we'll be using. Each one of these things here has a name associated with it, so an easy to reference name. And it has buttons associated. So the negative button is left button, so the left arrow button. The positive button is the right arrow button. The alternative on the opposite side of the keyboard is the A and the D for the negative and the positive. Okay, so basically what this is saying is this horizontal value is associated with these buttons, with A, D, left, and right. For us, what I want to do is I want to use the A and the D buttons, or the left and the right arrow buttons, to move our character around the screen. So I'm going to get axes. The axis that was defined over here is horizontal. All right, so basically what I'm doing is I'm saying, is the player pushing a button? Is the A or D or the arrow keys being pressed? If so, put the value, some value between, if you're pushing the A key, for example, you're getting a value between -1 and 0. And if you are pushing the D key, you're getting a value between 0 and 1. So take that value and put it into move, into our float variable move. All right. I then want to take that float variable move and I want to use it to directly affect my rigid body. There's a whole bunch of different ways of doing this. What I'm going to do, what I call it, my RB. What I want to do is, no, I don't want to do that. I want to directly affect the velocity vector. That's a 2D vector. Some of you right now are saying, whoa, don't do that. You never ever affect the velocity vector. It's actually probably true in a lot of cases you don't want to, because it gives unnatural movement, especially with physics objects. It gives unnatural movement because basically the velocity vector is a vector that determines how a rigid body is moving. And if I change it without adding force, if I just change the velocity vector instead of adding forces to it, then I'm not actually using the physics engine to move this character around. Instead, I'm using the velocity vector directly. And that's what we're going to do. Because we're making an arcadey style game, I'm not going to move the character around through forces by add force, which is what you would use if you wanted to add force to your rigid body. I'm not going to use the add force function. I'm going to directly affect the velocity, and that's going to give me an instantaneous change. So if you press the A button, it's going to be moving to the left, and if you press the D button, it'll immediately be moving to the right. You don't have to counteract any forces you've applied. We are going to be using this, the physics though, the physics for jumping and for falling. So it's not like our rigid body is not being used correctly. So anyway, guys, some of you are saying, don't use that, but I'm going to use it. I don't care. All right, so velocity is equal to a new vector 2D, because this is my rigid body is a 2D rigid body, which means it's only being affected in two-dimensional, in 2D. So it's a new vector 2, and what I want it to be equal to is, I want it to be equal to my move value. So the value, whether or not someone's pushing the button. If they're not pushing a button, it's going to be 0. If they are pushing a button, it's going to be between -1 and 1. My move value times my max speed. So right there, what that means is I'm going to be getting a value between negative max speed and max speed, depending on which button's been pushed. Okay, and by adjusting max speed, we'll then be able to make those values go up and down. All right. The y value of our vector 2D is going to be whatever the current one is. So it's going to be my RB dot velocity dot y. So I'm not actually, in this circumstance, I'm not actually changing the y value. Okay, the only thing we're manipulating is the x value of this vector 2D. The y value of the vector 2D is not being affected in any way. All right, I'm going to save this. I'm going to save my player controller, and we're going to come here and we're going to take a look at it. Now, if I typed everything correctly, then when I press play, we're going to be able to move this character around. Sometimes I don't do everything correctly, so let's take a look. Did I get any? Okay, good. I didn't get any errors. And if I press A and D, nothing's happening. I forgot to do something. The last thing I forgot to do to make sure this character is going to move is, if you remember correctly, let's go down here and take a look at this right now. If you remember correctly, we added a public variable called max speed. It was set to 0, so we were multiplying everything by 0. Let's give it a value of 5. Okay. When I press play now, play, and I move my character around, boo, boo, he's moving back and forth. I don't know if I like that speed. We're going to check it out in a minute. He's not flipping directions, and he is not going into the run, but we're going to take care of that as soon as we are out of here. So now we want to make sure that our character is flipping directions. That's the first thing we're going to take a look at, all right? Flipping directions. it's going to take a little bit of manipulation because we have to know which direction this character is already facing. And it's not going to be too hard to figure out. What we basically want to know, we already know if the player is pressing a button. We already know if the player is pressing either A or D or the arrow keys. All right, so if, let's do this. We're going to use an if statement here. If our move value is, let me make sure I get this right. Let's say our move value is greater than 0. So if our move value is greater than 0, that means that the player is pressing the D button. So they're facing, they want to move to the right. And 2 ampersigns to make sure we've got an and in there. And our character is, well, we don't have this set up yet, so we'll have to do something first. We're going to put in here an additional private variable called, let's call it facing right, and it's going to be a bool. It's going to be a Boolean value. Bool. So it's either going to be facing right is true or false. So let's say facing right. Facing right. So let's say if he's pushing down the D, he wants to move to the right, but facing right is not true, and you can say not true simply by doing that. If that's the case, then we want to flip our character. And we're going to have to write the flip function, which we don't actually have yet. All right, that's the first thing we want to do. Now, there's another situation. Else, if our player is move, he's pushing down the A key, so move is therefore less than 0. If move is less than 0 and our character is facing right, then once again we want to flip it. All right, flip. We don't actually have a flip function yet. We're going to write it in 1 second. So basically what this is saying is if our player is pushing the D key and he's facing left, then flip him around. If our character is pressing the A key and he's facing right, then turn him the other way. All right. We want to make sure in our start, let's actually initialize our facing right, and we're going to set it up it to true. So our character, whenever we start, we want our character to be facing right. Okay, so our facing right is true. Now, with this in mind, we're going to have to actually add a new function. So I'm going to come down here, boop, boop, and I'm going to say void, and I'm going to create myself a new function here. That's called flip, because that's what we called it above. It does not take any variables. That's our flip. And what we want to do, it's going to be a very, very simple thing. Basically what we want to do is we want to flip the graphic around. We want the character to face the other way. For our character to face the other way, we are going to use the negative value. Let's take a look. Let's go over to character for a minute. Let's go into our scene with our character selected. Watch what happens when I scale. Where's my character? Sorry. Watch what happens when I scale. What do I have selected here? Watch what happens when I scale the X of my character. All right, you see that? When I made it -2, my character flipped in the other direction. Okay? That is basically what we want to happen. We're going to just flip the graphic. We're not actually going to flip anything else. We're not going to make 2 different sets of animations or anything else. We're just going to flip the graphic. All right? So, in order to do that, the first thing we're going to do, if we're in the flip function, we want to make facing right equal to not facing right. So it's going to automatically do the opposite. So whatever facing right was, if facing right was true, it's going to make it false. If it was false, it's going to make it true. It's just going to reverse it. That's the first thing we're going to do in here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the scale. We already took a look at it over here, the scale in our transform. And we are going to make, we're going to say we're going to have a new vector 3. Because scale is x, y, and z in the transform node, a new vector 3, and we're going to call it, let's call it, it doesn't really matter, we're going to call it the scale. All right, and that's going to be equal to our transform dot scale. Okay, actually it's going to be transform dot local scale, sorry, local scale. Just like it said there. So I'm taking the values from here, 2, 2, and 1, and I am placing it in the scale. Okay, I'm getting it from the transform, I'm getting the local scale, and I'm putting it into scale. I am now going to take the scale, the x value, the scale.x, and I'm going to say that's equal to, I'm going to say times equal, this is just a shorthand of writing this, times equal -1. So what this is basically saying is take the x value and multiply it by -1, which is going to give me either -2 or 2, depending on what state we're in there. All right? So let's make it equal to -1. Then I want to take this entire thing, I want to say transform dot local scale, and I want to set it back equal to the scale. All right, so basically all I did in this function is I took my facing, I reversed it, so whatever it was, I turned it the other way. I took my scale from my transform and I put it in the scale. I multiplied the x value only by -1, because you saw that's exactly what we want to do here. We want to multiply this scale times -1, and then I put it back in the transform. Okay, let me save this file, save. And once again, as long as all my code is written properly, when I say play, when I move forward and I move the other way, you can see my character is now flipping back and forth. Great, we are almost there. We are almost there. Our character is moving back and forth, and he is flipping. The next thing we want to do now is we want to add the animation. And that is very easy to do as well. So, we've already got, let's go back here and take a look. So we've only got a handful of lines of code right now. What we want to do, we already have our reference to our animator right here. What we want to do is we actually want to set the value of our, let's go back and take a look at it in here, of our parameter speed to whatever the movement is. All right? And we want to do that right here in our fixed update. In fact, we want to do it immediately after getting our float value, our move value. So what we can do is we can say my anim dot, and now we want to reference that parameter. We have a choice of set, float, bool, etc. Ours is a float. Boom. Ours is a float. Speed is a float. And we want to give it, quotations, the name of the parameter, quotations, which was speed. We already said it was speed over there. We want to give it the value. We want to give it that parameter, and we want to give it a value. The value of that is going to be move value. Now, the problem is our move value is either negative. It's between -1 and 1, and we really don't care. Our speed value right now, if we go back and take a look at our animator, is set up so that whenever speed is greater than 0.1, it's going to move down here, and whenever speed is less than 0.1, it's going to move here. If they're pressing the A key and we pass in our movement value, well, it's always going to be less than 1, and it's never going to kick in. So we don't want that to happen. What we want to pass in is the absolute value of move. So just the value between 0 and 1, regardless of which input button they're pushing. Okay, so we want to use math.f dot ABS right at the top. That means absolute value, the absolute value of move. All right, so what that's going to return, instead of it returning a value between -1 and 1, it's only going to give us a value, regardless of which key they're pressing, a value between 0 and 1. Okay, that's all we have to do. Let's save that, file, save. Now, theoretically, as long as we've done everything right, when we say play, our character will start running. All right, I have an exit time. There's something I forgot to do. So you can see that my thing kicks in. It takes a moment to kick in and kick out. It takes a moment for him to stop running. We're just going to go back here for a minute. We're going to take a look at this transition and make sure has exit time is not checked. And has exit time is not checked. All right, let's save that. File, save our scene. This thing is already saved. We don't have to do anything in here. I'll just do it to make sure. Good. And I'm going to play once again. We might have to adjust this value here. Maybe 0.01 is not enough. Let's try playing again. Running. Perfect. Look at that. He stops right away. That's exactly what we're looking for. Perfect. Okay. So now our character runs back and forth, flips back and forth, and goes from the idle state to the run state. Guys, we are moving along really, really nicely. What I want you to do, if you followed along with me now, the code is there, everything is there for you to be able to do what you want, to run back and forth. What I want you to do is go through and play with this value located right down here, your max speed, to get the feel you want for your game. You might want it faster, you might want it slower. You're going to have to adjust your max speed here. If you do, make sure you adjust your run speed so it's running appropriately as well. You want to make sure the feet look like they line up. And if you don't like the transition, make sure these transitions are smaller. If I want it to transition faster, I can squash it down even more. Did I just close that settings? Did I just close my thing? Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Anyway, make sure you squash it down. Try your play. And make sure it's looking the way you want it. Alright guys, we are moving along really well. I am happy with the way everything is going. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. If you're having a hard time with the code, don't worry about it guys. Practice makes perfect. Alright? If you have anything you want to tell me, comments down below. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this another episode of 2D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanis. In the last episode, we took care of moving the character about. He can move around, he can run around, he can move back and forth anyway. Today I want to continue with that. I want to finish off the last of the moves we're actually going to do with this character. Right now the player has the ability with the A and the D key to be able to move the character left and right, and the character will face the appropriate direction. The last thing I want to be able to do, well, not the last thing, the last movement thing I want to do with this character is allow him to jump. And we're going to be using the spacebar to jump. Okay? There's a lot of different ways to make characters jump, and I think we're going to use a method that determines whether or not the character is on the ground. If the character's on the ground, he's able to jump. If he's not on the ground, he can't jump, and he's either falling or he's jumping. And that's really the concept that we're going to be using to build our character in this episode. Like I said, there's lots of different ways of doing this, and what I've decided to do, I saw a technique that was used recently by some of the guys actually at Unity, and I really liked it, and I think we're going to use that technique here. Now, I've simplified it, but I think we're going to use it anyway. Alright guys, so let's get started. There are a few things we need to do to be able to make our character jump. The first thing we have to do is be able to identify what is the ground. What can the character jump off of? Can he jump off the air? Well, if you want to double jump, yes, but we're not going to actually talk about double jumps right now. Can he jump off? What can he jump off of? In our case, we really want him to jump off of these platforms, either the platform or the bridge or whatever else we decide is the actual space, the area that the character is going to be playing along. Whatever the map is made up of, that's what they can jump off of. So we're going to have to be able to identify what the character can jump off of. The second thing we have to do is be able to identify when the character is actually on the ground. When is the character on the ground? We have to know that in order to be able to say, yes, you can jump. And the last thing we have to do is build our jump animation techniques in the animator itself. We're going to be going back to the animator and adding additional things in here. Now, the reason I'm quite excited about using the Unity guys' idea for creating the jump is it allows us to introduce a new technique within the animator called the blend tree. So I really want to use it for that reason as well. But for now, let's go through and make the changes necessary within the scene to be able to allow our assets to be able to connect and jump. All right, afterwards we'll take a look at the code. So right now we know that our character has to be able to jump off of these prefabs, right? These things we've made in the last few episodes. I made a long platform, a short platform, and a bridge. And all three of these things here, I want the character to say, yep, when I'm on that, I'm on the ground. So we talked a little bit. Let's take a look at this one here. We talked a little bit previously about the concept of tagging, and I think we tagged the character as, yes, as player. And I told you a tag was used to clean up your scene, to really organize your scene, and to be able to search through things later on and say, well, what else is a player? Show me everything that's a player. And we're going to do the same thing with the platforms. But instead of using a tag, instead of tagging this as ground, what we're going to do instead is we're going to create a new layer. Okay, over here, the layer area. We're going to create a brand new layer. Now, if I've got, with a long platform selected, and I click on default, on layer, we can see that we've got a number of different layers that Unity has automatically created for us when we built our project. A default, a transparent FX layer, an ignore raycast layer, water. My mouth is like not working today. I'm sorry, guys. And a UI layer. What we're going to do today, we're going to add a new layer. So go down, click the button, add layer, and boop, this is going to pop up. And find the first one available if this is a brand new project. And if you've never done this before, then it's going to be layer 8. And I'm going to call it ground. Okay? So anything that's on my ground layer, I'm saying my character can jump off of. That's my plan. Anything on the ground layer, my player can jump off of. So I'm going to go to each of these, the long platform, and I'm going to change my layer to ground. And I'm going to go to my short platform, and I'm going to change my layer to ground. And lastly, I'm going to go to my bridge over here and change my layer to ground. Oh, it already is ground. Cool. Change my layer to ground. Anyway, did I miss one of them? Black bridge, ground. Okay, I must have started with a black bridge. All right, so that's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to make sure that the long platform, and like all three of those things here, were actually set up to be on the ground. Okay, perfect. Now, we can identify what the ground is. Now we have to identify when we're on the ground. That's our next thing we're going to need to do. And if we take a look over here, we changed our prefab, and the awesome thing about changing your prefabs is it automatically gets sent upwards into all of the things we actually have on the game itself. So that's cool. So you can make massive changes. If I had 15 long platforms, then all those prefabs would have changed, and that's really a lot more useful than having to go in and change each one. Anyway, the next thing we're going to do is be able to identify when the character is touching the ground. And we're going to use a technique. There's several different ways of doing it. You can create a small circle under the character, and the small circle, and say, has this circle intersected another collider? And if so, then we know we're touching something. Or we can make a ray cast. We can do a ray and say, is the ray intersecting another collider? And if it is, then we could say we're on the ground. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. We can even, if we wanted to, go through and say, just use this collider here and say, if this collider is in contact with something, then we're on the ground. We're going to use the first method I mentioned. We're going to actually build a small circle underneath the character's feet. Every update, we're going to say update, update, update. Every update, build a small circle under the character's feet. And if it's in contact with a collider, that is a ground layer. In the ground layer, we're going to say, we're on the ground, and we can either jump, or we can fall. All right? That's our plan. So what we have to do is identify where the character's feet are. We have to say, where is this circle going to be created? I don't want to create a big circle around the entire character. I just want a little tiny circle right underneath his feet. So what I'm going to do, with my character selected, I've got the character asset selected, I'm going to say create, right here in the hierarchy menu. I'm going to say create. I'm going to say create empty child. And you're going to see that automatically builds an additional game object underneath that character within its hierarchy. And I am going to change this to be named on ground. It doesn't really matter what you call it. Check ground, on ground, ground checker, anything you want. Okay, on ground. Or, maybe I'll call it the ground. I said it doesn't matter, and it doesn't. But the ground, okay? So let's call it check ground. Sorry, it's early in the morning, and I'm acting all fuddled in the head. Anyway, guys, check ground. We're going to call it check ground. And check ground is going to be the location that we draw our small circle or shoot our ray from, or however we decide to do this in code. As an artist, it doesn't really matter. I'm in here, I'm building the stuff, I'm building everything right here, and the coder is going to write the code and say, okay, raycast or small circle, or however you want to do it. The last thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm clicking on right here, boop. I'm clicking on this little tiny square right here, and I'm going to click this green thing. Now what this basically does is it allows me to choose an icon, and you can see it showed up over here. Choose an icon to represent that character or that thing. And basically it's just a visual representation of this game object. And I'm going to move this into place. So right now I can see it's at my default location. It's at the origin of my character, and I'm just going to move it down, so it's approximately at his feet. So right there is pretty good. And this is the location that I'm going to actually draw my circle. Okay? The very last thing we have to do in setting up the character is create the different animations we're going to use. So let's go back and take a look at the sprites. Beep. And this is my Explorer sprites right here. We already used most of these. We've already used the first several for the idle. We used several after that for the run, and we've got 3 left for the for the animation of the jump. I'm only using 3 frames. I'm using a jump, a fall, and a land. And you know what? You could use many, many more. In fact, you probably should. This is going to look fine. You've already seen it running and jumping and landing. It's going to look fine, but you can make much smoother animation by adding several more frames. This entire thing, I did this the cheapest way I could. I did this absolutely cheap, guys. If you're going to make a good game, take your time, make good assets, nice clean assets that are enjoyable to look at. Not these crappy things I made. Anyway, we've got ourselves 3 different animations in here. Or sorry, 1 different animation made up of 3 different frames. What I'm going to do instead, though, I'm going to break this up into 3 separate animations. 3 entirely separate animations. One is going to be the jump, one is going to be the falling, and one is going to be the land. All right? To do that, it's very, very simple. With our character selected, with my animator in place, with my animation up, with my animation window up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add several new animations to this character, okay? And to add a new animation, all you have to do is go up to here and say create new clip. So let me show you how to do that again. Right here where it says player idle, that's the default state. Right here there's 2 little up and down arrows. Click those little tiny arrows, boop, and say, well, I'm going to switch over to something else for a minute. I'm going to switch over to animation first because I want them to appear here. So go up in here, little two arrows, click on it, and say create new clip. It's going to say, what's it called? And I'm going to call this one here player jump. All right, just like that. So we can see that we've automatically added a new animation down here, player jump. Perfect. We're going to do this 2 more times. We're going to go back up here, add, create new clip, and we are going to say, oops, make sure I type it right, player fall. All right, and one last time we're going to say create clip, player land. Okay, so now we've got ourselves 3 new animations down here, and each of these animations have appeared inside the animator. All right, but currently there's nothing associated with them. Now, if you guys remember correctly, the last time we did this, we just simply grabbed and dropped the stuff on the character. That's how we built a new animation. And you can do that when you're selecting more than 1 frame. But in this situation, because I'm only using a single frame out of each of these areas, I'm only using a single frame, it doesn't do that. If I try, watch what happens if I try and drag and drop this onto the character. Instead of saying, oh, it's a new animation, it says, oh, I'm adding in a new image. All right? And I don't want that. I don't want to add in a new image. I'm not interested in doing that. I'm interested in adding a new animation. Let me delete this. Delete. Boom. Okay, I want to add in a new animation. So I went through and I added all 3 of these. Now I'm going to go back to my animation window. I'm going to bring up player jump first. There we go. And I'm going to now select my player jump from down here, and I'm going to drag it and I'm going to drop it right here. Boom, and you can see it's going to appear at the first frame. Perfect, that's what I wanted. Let's do turn this off now. Let's do exactly the same thing with player fall, which is this one. Drop it and stop it. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to say player land, and we're going to drag it and we're going to drop it. There we go. So, and stop it. So when it turns red like that, that's in record mode, and anything you do, anything you adjust or touch is being recorded. All I wanted to do, like I said, was go in and make sure we actually had images associated with this, frames actually associated with it. All right, and we have them for all. So your player run has all of them. All right, so that's all we wanted to do. Okay, so perfect. Now everything is set up to be able to write our code. That's all we really need to do now to be able to in the game itself. And now all that's left to do is the coding. Actually, I lied. There is something else we have to do. We've only actually done half of what we needed to do. Right now, we're missing a couple of things. If we go back to our animator, we discussed how we had a number of new states and new animations within here. And I told you that we were going to be using a concept of a blend tree to be able to create our changes in the character's jump, fall, and landing animation. It's not necessarily necessary in this case. It's not necessary in this case. We only have 2 states we're going through this blend, and it doesn't even really blend. But you might, this is easily expandable, okay? The concept these Unity guys put forward is easily expandable. You can put in a dozen different animation states in here, and you'll be able to go through each one of them. We have to add a couple of things. First of all, we have to know when we want to transfer to a new state. And first of all, we've already said that we're either grounded or we're not grounded. And if we're not grounded, we're falling or we're jumping. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new parameter. So with parameter selected, we're going to use the plus sign and we're going to add a new bool, and we're going to call it is grounded. All right, is grounded. That's our first one. So if we are grounded, we can run around. If we're not grounded, then we are falling, or we're jumping or falling. All right, we're going to add another parameter, plus sign, and we're going to base, it's going to be a float. We're going to call this one here vertical speed. And basically what we're going to do, this is how a blend works. Right-click inside of your animator window, right-click and say create state and say from new blend tree. And you're going to get this new node that shows up. And let me change it right away. I'm going to change the name right away. Change the name to jump blend tree. Okay, so it looks like everything else here. It looks like just another state, and that's perfect. What we want to do, let's scroll and put this up here for now, and let's grab our fall and put it up here too. Okay, so basically, we talked this roadmap. We've already built it before. We built it together before, and basically how this works is the player's idling. And whenever someone pushes a button, we have this transition. So we go from player idle, we transfer down here to player run, and the character's running left or right, depending on which button's being pushed. And we stay in here until we let go of the button, at which point we transition along here back to player idle. So we're back in the player idle state. So the only way to ever get to player run is through player idle. That's what this map basically says right now. The only way to ever be running is if we go from player idle. Okay, the jump / fall is a little bit different. We might go to jump / fall for a number of reasons. Let's say we're running and we fall off the edge of a platform to our death, and that is going to be a fall scenario. Someone pushes the space bar and we jump. That's the jump scenario. An enemy hits us and sends us flying. You know, that's another scenario where we could be in idle state and suddenly we're flying in the air. So we want to be able to go from either the idle or the run state, or anything else for that matter, to our jump state up in here. All right, and that's what this little blue note is for, the any state. Okay, so from wherever we are, I'm going to right click, I'm going to click it, I'm going to right click, make transition, and drop it off my blend tree. So no matter what state we're in, we can always go from whatever state to the jump. Okay, as long as our let's go down here and we're going to say our list of conditions. We're going to add a little plus sign. As long as our is grounded is false. So the second our ground is no longer underneath our feet, we're going to transition into this jump state. Okay. We want to be able to transfer out of this jump state into the player. Oh, I don't want player fall in here. I lied. I want it to be player land. Let's move this one up here. We want to go to the player land state, so the player's landing, whenever ground is suddenly true. So make transition from one to the other, and in here, and we're going to click on this, and we are going to say list of conditions whenever our is grounded is true. So transfer along here, stay in here as long as it's false. The second it's true, we pop out. From this location here, we are going to go back into idle. So I'm going to right click, make transition, and go to the idle state. Bam. This one here, we're going to have a simple has exit time. Okay, we're going to leave has exit time. Let's make this much smaller. It doesn't really matter. It's only a single frame, so it doesn't really matter. But it has an exit time, all right? So basically what this is going to do, it's going to say this character's falling or jumping. Transfer over here because he's no longer grounded. Stay in here. Do whatever we're going to do inside the blend tree. And move out along here whenever we've landed. Stay in here for a specific amount of time and then go back to player idle, at which time we can go back and forth in here again. Okay? That is our new animation roadmap, basically. The last thing we have to do is we have to build our jump blend. Okay? So double click. When you double click on that node, we come into this new window. We haven't lost the old one. You can see up here, we're currently in, this is basically like a tree, a directory tree, and we are in the jump blend. If we want to go back to the base layer, we can click, double click, brings us back here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to add in our various states that we can blend between. Okay, we don't want to be using speed for that matter. We want to be using, our parameter is vertical speed. So how fast the character is traveling up and down. That's what we're using. How fast the character is traveling up and down to determine where we are, what we're blending between. So you can either have 1 or 2 blends in here. We're going to be using a one-dimensional blend, which means it's only taking 1 parameter. The next thing we have to do is we have to add our various states in here. So let's add a motion field. And that motion field is going to be, so what it basically did when I did that, it made this new drop down here. And it's saying motion none. It's telling me the threshold and the timing of that animation. What I want to do is I want to come into my animation, I want to find player jump, and I want to drag it, and I want to drop it right there. So you can see the awesome thing is it automatically appeared here. Let's adjust this around a little bit. Why can't I move you? Because I only have 1 right now, maybe that's why. You can see that automatically appeared right there. And it's allowing me, based on, let's go back to the blend tree for a minute. It's based on some threshold. Well, I only have 1, so let me add the second one before I get too excited. Plus, add a motion field, and I'm going to add into there player fall and drop it in there. Okay, so now I've got 2 things that I can blend between. Now I can actually explain this. I've got 2 things that I can blend between the player jump and the player fall. What we can do is we can go in. I want to take off automate thresholds. We can automatically change how these things blend, and we can see that at right now at 0. Whenever vertical speed is 0, we are 100%, or 0 or lower, we're 100% on player jump. And when it's 1, we are 100% on player fall. That's what these threshold values are. Our thresholds, you might have to adjust this slightly depending on what your gameplay is, and you're going to adjust it to look good. But I want to kind of switch back and forth. Basically, I want my player, whenever my player is jumping, when it's greater than 1, and I want it to be falling when my vertical speed is less than 1, so -1. What that means is whenever you jump, your maximum speed is when you first leave the ground, and as gravity drags down on you as you travel upwards, you slow down, slow down, slow down. So as long as our value is above, 1 or greater, it's going to be in the player jump state. And whenever we've hit our vertical speed of 0, and now we're starting to fall downwards again, so it's starting to move downwards, and our vertical speed is going faster in the negative direction. Once it passes -1, we are going to switch states, and we're going to travel into the fall. Okay, so that's basically what this is. There should be a blend of some kind here. To be honest, I don't know if it blends in 2D. I know it'll blend in 3D because it'll actually move the skeleton, and I'm not sure if it blends in 2D or not. But in 3D, basically, oh, maybe we can see down here. Let's see. Can I see it? See if it blends? No, it doesn't. It just switches. Okay. You can see down there, I'm going up here is my jump, and down here as I start to fall, it goes to my fall state. And that's what we want it to do. All right, based on our vertical speed. Now we are going to write the code that is going to control how all of this is working. You know what, guys? Actually, looking at my timing right now, I think that we are about 20 minutes. And I don't want these videos to go any longer than 20 minutes. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to cut it off. This is our prep for our jump, and we'll take a look at the code in the next episode. And that way you guys can watch this part over and over again if you need to, and then watch the code part over and over again if you need to, without having to watch everything in between. All right, guys? So I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. I'm hoping you guys are getting what you want out of it, but if you're not, you have to let me know. Don't feel bad about saying thumbs down. You're not giving me what I want to know. And then, if you do that, if you actually give me the thumbs down, let me know in the comments what I did wrong. All right, guys? I am doing these not for me. I know how to do this already. I'm doing this for you guys. So what I want you to do is make sure that if I'm doing something that you don't understand in some way, you let me know down in the comments. All right? So thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of 2D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanis, In the last episode, we went through and we prepared our character and our assets and our animator for the character jump. And today it's going to be another coding lesson. We haven't done a whole lot of code yet. We've only done limited code. And there's not a whole lot of code to go in this either. So don't be afraid if you guys are saying, oh my god, not coding. Yep, we're going to be doing some coding here, but there's not very much to it, to be honest. Not very much at all. So what we're going to do is we are going to start our coding right now. We're not going to actually add an additional thing. Let's click on our character right here. We're not going to actually add an additional script to our character. All this new code is going to go into our player controller. We're going to add it directly to that. We've already got our player controller up and running. It's used to move our character around, and this is additional movement. So kind of any input that we're going to be giving this character, I want to add into the player controller script. So we're not going to create a new script at all. Let me just drag this over so you guys can see it. Boop. All right, there is our original player controller. We're gonna make the changes to this directly. We're gonna add a couple of variables that are gonna help us control jumping. So let's actually let's just go right in. We'll just add it right here. Those are movement variables. Let's call these ones here our jumping variables. I'm just labeling this so we know. Variables. It's a good idea to comment your code in case you have to hand this off. Let's say that you want someone in your class to take a look at your code, or you want your buddy to take a look at it. If you've gone in and you've commented it well, at least they'll be able to go through and see what you're trying to do without having to try and decipher your crazy code. All right, so there's a couple of things that we're going to add for our jumping. The first thing we're going to add is a bool. Our bool, it's a private bool, it's fine, and we're going to call it grounded. And we're going to say that's equal to false to start off with. What we'll do is we'll start off with our character a little bit off the ground. And he'll fall like he's kind of jumping out of the ship. Okay, so bool grounded equals false, and this is what we're going to be using to transfer back and forth from our blend tree and to our landing animation. Okay, our bool. The next thing we're going to do, I mentioned that we were going to use a little tiny circle. We're going to draw a little tiny circle under our character's feet. Every frame. And make sure that we are still in contact with the ground or no longer in contact with the ground. All right. To do that, we have to know how big the radius is going to be of that little circle. We might as well put it in here. So we can change it if we need to without having to go into the code itself. Let's call it float. We'll call it ground. Let's call it something everyone knows. Ground check circle. That sounds pretty good. Ground check radius, maybe? Radius. That's fine. Ground check radius. So how big is the circle we're creating to check and see if we're doing it? I've decided to go with the circle method rather than the ray. You can decide either way, though. They will both, I think, amount to pretty much the same thing. I'm going to pick a random number here, 0.2 float. We can change that later on if it's too big or too small. All right. Now, what we're going to use, we're going to be using like I said, the circle to be able to check and see if we're on the ground. And it's basically a physics 2D function called overlap circle. And overlap circle will take a number of parameters. It's going to take the size of the circle you're creating, the position of the circle you're creating, and what layer you're checking to see if you've intersected with. So it's going to say, what layer are you trying to intersect with? So I just repeated that twice, didn't I? So what we're going to do is we're going to add a number of public variables, so we can change this around. A number of public variables that are going to allow us to check those different things. The first thing we're going to check is our public ground. Public float. No, sorry, not a float. I am lying. A public. I'm drawing a brain fart here. A layer mask. Layer mask. That's what I want to do. So, right, a public layer mask, and that is going to be, what is our ground layer? Our ground layer. Every once in a while, guys, I will space out for a second, and that's because when I quit YouTube about a year ago, my little girls were 2 years old, and they couldn't really be left on their own. Now they are almost 3. They're turning 3 very, very soon, and they're playing in the background, and I have to every once in a while look and see what they're still doing. I'm still a stay-at-home dad. So that hasn't changed at all, but I have a little bit more freedom now to be able to do stuff. They play quietly now, and they don't always try and kill each other. So if I go through and I space out for a second, guys, I'm really sorry. My main responsibility is still being a stay-at-home dad. All right, so public layer mask our ground layer. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to have the location. Like I said, the location where we were going to build this circle, and it's going to be a transform. And we've already created the position, so it's going to be a transform, and we're going to call this I don't know, ground check. All right, ground check. The last thing we're going to need is the force that we can use, how much we can jump with, how much force we can jump with, and this is going to be a public float, and we'll just call it, I don't know, jump height. That should be fine. Our jump height. I don't think we really need anything else out of there right now. I think that's all the variables we're going to require to be able to actually do this work. So those are our variables that we're going to use. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add in right in here, because it should have been here anyway. We're going to add this into our update. And I know I told you guys before that you should be doing anything to do with physics within the fixed update, and though it probably won't matter, to be honest, it probably won't matter in this situation, because our fixed update is going to run, pretty often. But I want to make sure that I am checking the spacebar, because it's not something you hold down; it's something you press, and you might press it just very, very quickly. And though I'm sure it's doubtful you could ever miss it, I'm going to add everything to update right here anyway. So there's a couple things we want to check. We want to check if we're grounded, first of all. So are we grounded? Grounded. And we want to know if the player has actually pressed on the jump button. So we already knew how to do this before. We're going to use our input dot get axes. Get axes, or in this case, get axes. Boom. And the axis we want to use is it's defined as jump. You guys can go make sure. I showed you in a few episodes ago how to check what your axes were. We're going to be using the jump axes. And if the jump axes, I did this wrong, didn't I? I did. Sorry, I'm missing a parentheses right here. If our jump axes is greater than 0, then we're going to go inside here. So if we're grounded and the person has pressed the jump button, we want to do something. And what do we want to do? Well, first thing we want to do is we want our animation to switch modes. So we've already defined previously my anim right there. It's in my animator. So my anim dot set bool, and we're setting the bool. We already created our bools before. We created is grounded. It's right there. Set bool is grounded, and we want to set that to false, because what's happening is our character is jumping. So we want to set that to false. Our character is actually going to be leaving the ground here. The next thing we want to do is we want to set my RB, so that's our rigid body. We want to set our rigid body. What we want to do is we want to add a force to that rigid body. And we're going to add force basically is how a rigid body should be used. When you add a force to a rigid body, it's automatically going to push it in some direction. Okay, it's going to add a force and make that rigid body start moving. In this situation, and once again, we're in 2D here, so my RB dot add force. We are going to add force, and we're going to add a new vector 2. It's a 2D vector, just like before. We're only moving in 2D. We don't want to add anything in the X and Y, because that's being controlled by our movement below. But we do want to add, in this situation, our force that is equal to our jump height. All right, so we're adding a force to the character that's going to make him move up in the air. And the last, you know what? I'm going to move this around a bit. We're going to do it like this instead. I should have done it like this. Instead, I'm going to go up above it. I'm going to change my grounded right away. My grounded right, where is it? Where did I add grounded? Grounded is false. I'm going to say grounded right here is equal to false. Oops. So I'm setting my grounded to false, and instead of sending false in here, why don't I just send in grounded? rather than try and do everything twice. All right, so that is all the code that I'm going to require to be able to have this character, the input from the player, be accepted. So the next thing I need to do is I have to actually act upon this. So what we've done here is we've said, okay, he's pushing the button and we're on the ground, and therefore set my ground to false and jump. All right. The next thing we're going to take a look at is we are going to have, and then we've gone through and we've set the values in our animator, and we've added the force to the character. So the character is already moving up and down, which is perfect. This is giving me an error here because I am missing. What am I missing? Why are you giving me an error? Oh, I'm missing a bracket. Boop, right there. Missing a bracket. Okay, all is good. I'm going to save this file. Save. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to my fixed update right down here, and we're going to add a little bit of code in here. I don't really know why. I don't know if I had to do this. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I don't have to. Anyway, I'll stick with it because this is how I wrote it in my test game, and I'm going to write it like this now. I probably didn't have to do it here, but we're going to do it here anyway. So the first thing I'm going to do in fixed update right away is I'm going to check if we are ground. I'm not spelling anything right. Grounded. All right. That's the first thing we're going to do. So grounded is equal to, and I'm doing this wrong. No, I'm not. Okay, sorry. Grounded, brain fart again. Man, my brain's barely working. I need more sleep, guys. I need more sleep. Grounded is going to be equal to, this is where we're going to create our little circle. Circle. So it's equal to our physics 2D. We're going to be pulling some functions out of there. Dot overlap circle. Now, I've already talked to you guys about this, about what overlap circle was. Basically, what this is going to do is going to draw a little tiny circle, and it's going to check a number of things when I add in my parentheses there. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to take a vector 2D, which is the point at which this is going to be drawn. And we are going to draw it at, we're going to draw this at ground check. So what do we call it up here? Make sure, yeah, ground check. Ground check dot position. Okay, great. Ground check dot position. The next thing it's going to take is the radius. What's the size of this? What's the size of this circle? And the size of the circle is going to be, we've already set it up here, is going to be our ground check radius. So we're going to add that in. Ground check radius. The last thing that this is going to take is a layer that it's going to be acted on. Which layer are we actually acting on? And we're going to be acting on this is our layer mask. Our layer mask is going to be ground layer is what we call it at the top. Ground layer. Bam. Ground layer. All right, so this right here is basically drawing a circle and checking to see if we have intersected anything. That's what grounded is going to be equal to. If we're intersecting the ground, then it's going to say true, and if we're not intersecting the ground, then it's going to say false. All right, so this is going to take care of falling. This is going to take care of falling. This right here might be a little bit of overkill. We probably don't even need to do this. I could check it without it, but this immediately sets ground to false, and this sets ground to false after each fixed update. This one here is going to occur more often than this one down here, as I've already mentioned, because of the timing between each of the frames. So the last thing we're going to do right down here is we're going to reset our bool, myanim set bool, because if we're not grounded and we're falling, I should say check to see if we're grounded. If no, then we are falling. I'm going to write that in there to make sure that anyone who ever sees this code knows why I did it. All right. And the last thing we're going to do, the actual jumping code, is we're going to say my anim. Every frame we're going to do this, not in an if statement. Every frame we do this. My anim dot set float. Now, I told you that we're going to, being grounded or not grounding is what moves us into our blend tree or out of our blend tree. But inside of the blend tree, we're looking at the vertical speed. Remember vertical speed? And vertical speed determines where and which state we're in. Okay? So we are going to add, we're going to update this float, this vertical speed. So I'm going to say quotations, vertical speed, end quotations, and comma. And what we're going to set that to is the velocity, each update, each fixed update, the velocity of our rigid body in the vertical direction. My RB dot velocity dot y. So it's only setting it to the value of the velocity in the y direction. So it's basically the vertical velocity of the rigid body. And that is all we should need to do. All right, so I'm going to say File, and I'm going to say Save, and then I'm going to check this out. First of all, let's see, do we get any errors? No errors so far, so that's pretty good. Go back to our scene. This guy should fall, and when he falls, he should immediately, let's maximize it on play, he should immediately go into the fall. Boom, and he did. Now, he didn't land, so something went wrong with my landing. Maybe my circle is too small, or maybe the exit time's too long. I'll have to go and check. All right, let me go check and figure that out. Okay, guys, it was a really stupid mistake, and let's go take a look at it. I realized it as soon as I stopped recording what the mistake was. We, in our character, we have not defined a bunch of things. First of all, we haven't defined anything in this player controller, the new stuff we've added. So let's go through that right now. The first thing we're going to do is ground check transform. We know it's this ground check layer. We're just going to click it, drag it, and drop it right there. Boom. So that is where we're drawing our circle. So far, so good. The next thing we're going to do is we need our ground check layer. It's got a drop down here. Click it and say ground. We already know that all of these things down here are ground. And the last thing is we're going to have to determine our jump height. And that is going to depend on a lot of different things. We're going to put a random number basically in there for now and see if we actually get our character moving up and down. But it's going to be based on the gravity and everything else that we've set. We haven't really discussed gravity at this point in time, but for now, let's say jump height of 150. That's a complete guess. All right. So now, when I hit play, this should work. I'm going to save this file, save my scene, play. Character should go into fall mode, and he should land. Perfect. If I press the space bar, jumps, very floaty, and lands. Okay, so this brings me to one last thing that we should check out. So this is working. See, and I can still move around and that kind of stuff, but he's extremely floaty, and I don't like that. Maybe if you guys are making a space game, this is something you would like. And he's jumping very, very high right now. If you guys were making a space game, maybe you would. Maybe that's what you'd want to do. But I don't want anything this floaty. So what we're going to take a look at is a couple of the environmental variables that you have associated with Unity. All right, let's go into here into, is it File? No, it's under Edit. It's under Project Settings, and it should be Physics 2D. Let me make sure it's here because I could be wrong. Velocity, default. Oh, I'm not too low. Gravity. Here it is. Okay, so I'm going to change my gravity. This is a platformer. It is a 2D platformer. It is kind of arcadey. I want this character to be very responsive. I don't want floaty. It's supposed to be on a planet, and this is actually the appropriate number for gravity. Negative 9.81 meters per second is the appropriate gravity. But I don't want that. I'm going to change this to a much higher value to make it a much sharper slowdown and a much sharper drop. All right, so let's try 30. This is a complete guess. Do I have to say save in here? No, I guess not. So I'm now going to try playing again and see what we get. All right, he fell much quicker. He does not jump anywhere near as high. All right, and he falls much quicker as well, which is what we're looking for. I don't like how high he's jumping now. I wanted to jump a little higher, so let's go back to our character. This is what you guys are going to have to do with yours. You have to go through and adjust these values. Let's try it at 250. Adjust your values to something you like. Falls much nicer there. I don't mind that. That jump is the right height. So 250 looks pretty good to me. All right. And you guys can adjust that value later on based on the objects you're creating as obstacles and the enemies and everything else. That should be fine. I think 250 looks pretty good. All right, guys. That's it. That's our code. Our character now runs, jumps. Watch what happens when he falls. Oh, fall. and he falls off. So I'm going to stop that because we don't destroy him in any way. That's how it's supposed to work. If the character falls, so from here, watch what happens right away. He starts falling and boom, hits the ground, immediately goes into the land, jumps, and immediately goes into the land. That is all working exactly as it should. The code, almost no code to it at all, you guys. You saw how easy that was. Almost no code at all. So, if you guys liked that episode, and I'm hoping you did because we're moving along really, really well now. If you liked that episode, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. It lets me know if I've done something wrong. If you guys give me a thumbs down, then please just let me know why. Let me know in the comments why. And I'm going to make adjustments. I'm going to make changes to help you guys better understand. All right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 2D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, we made our character jump. Our character is looking pretty darn awesome. He can move around, he can jump, but he can't yet defend himself. So in today's episode, guys, we're going to be taking a look at creating the projectile. It's going to be broken up into 2 different episodes again, I think, because there's a fair amount we're going to be going into in this episode. We're going to be building all of our assets, building a particle system for the first time, and then we're going to be adding the code that makes this thing fly around, etc., in the following episode. All right, guys, so let's get started. Okay, guys, so there are a number of things we need to do to be able to build our projectile. Basically, our ultimate goal is to be able to build something, a prefab, that's going to be sitting in here and that we can instantiate or create in the game every single time the player presses the fire button. All right, so in order to do so, let's start off by building the actual missile. Okay, I'm going to reuse the rocket because I'm lazy. That's all. You guys should make yourselves a real sexy something or other here. I'm pretty lazy. So I'm going to be using this rocket. Now that's obviously far too big. Let's try it at 0.3 and 0.3. That's fine. That's fine. I want to be able to see it. 0.3 is fine, and I want it to be facing in the -90 direction. Okay, that is my actual, let's not call it missile. I've already renamed this down here into player ship so we wouldn't get confused, but let's call this missile. All right, that's our missile. Now, this missile, it's going to travel along. We're gonna be able to apply a force to it ultimately, which means it's going to have a rigid body, but we're going to apply a force to this, and it's going to fly along, and it's going to crash into something, or miss something, or it's going to crash into something anyway, and it's going to explode. That's our goal, to make it explode like this. Okay, that's our ultimate goal. That's a few episodes from now, when we get into creating an enemy and creating enemy damage. But for now, guys, what we're going to need from this is we're going to need to set it up so that it can crash into something. We already know that in order for objects to touch each other or to interact, we need to add to it a collider of some kind. So I'm going to add a simple box collider to this missile. It's surrounding it perfectly, and I'm not going to change anything. It's perfectly fine the way it is. All right. The only thing I'm going to change is trigger. Bam. Is trigger. Is trigger means ultimately it's for the code. It's for the code. But is trigger means that another collider that enters or exits or stays inside of this collider can affect the code. So the code in some way, the code will trigger whenever something touches it, whenever something enters inside, exits, or stays within inside of this collider. All right, that's what isTrigger does. It basically allows code to be used. All right, so isTrigger is going to be turned on, and we're going to see more about that when we get into the coding episode next. All right. So this object, this missile, is going to be flying along. It's going to hit something and it's going to explode. Now we've got a couple of issues here because I want there to be smoke. I want there to be smoke coming out the back of this rocket, and I want there to be smoke that's kind of left along as it travels along, as it moves along. I want smoke to be kind of left behind. When we destroy this object, when we say, okay, boom, it hit something, we destroy it, I don't want that smoke to be destroyed as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to right click inside here. I'm just going to say create empty, and I'm going to create a brand new game object. All right, and I'm going to change it to 0, 0, 0. You can always say reset right here to make it go to 0, 0, 0. and I'm going to name it projectile. All right, and I'm going to use this as the parent for our missile. I'm going to use this as the parent for our missile. I'm going to have inside a projectile, I'm going to use this projectile to actually apply my forces to. So I'm going to apply forces to this projectile right here. But I'm also going to use it as the parent of the particle system. So when I destroy my rocket, I can leave my projectile, this parent object, on the screen for a little bit longer so the smoke has a chance to dissipate. All right, that's my idea behind it. My rocket can still explode, the smoke can dissipate, and then the entire thing gets deleted. So there's a couple of things we're going to need on this parent object. This parent object is going to drag any of its children object along with it. So I want to use this projectile to actually apply forces to. Physics, 2D, and I'm going to add a rigid body. We already know from our character that rigid body makes this thing into a physics-based object, and I can apply forces to it. I'm going to apply forces in order to make this thing fly. All right, that is the first thing I'm going to do with my rocket. All right, with the projectile. And you know what? I think that's the only thing I'm going to do for now. I'm going to add a couple of scripts a little bit later on, but that is for a later episode. So the only thing we had to do right now is add this rigid body. Okay, that is going to allow everything to fly. Now, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to add to here, create a particle system. Boop. This is our default particle system. It's really, really ugly. It basically uses the default particle material, or the default particle, to create these white blobs that get spread out over a specific distance. I'm going to rename this right away, and let's call this missile smoke particle system. All right, the missile smoke particle system. It doesn't look like a missile smoke particle system yet, but we're going to make it look that way right now. We can take a look at this system right down here, and we've got a bunch of different tabs along here. These tabs will change what you're seeing. So let's say we say the start lifetime, it's currently at 5 seconds. Let's just say instead of 5 seconds, it was 0.25 seconds. So you can see right away that my particles are dying off much quicker. So we're basically going to go through here and adjust all, or at least some, of these different headings in here in order to create a attractive particle system. Particles in Unity are really powerful. In fact, in almost any game engine they are. I really like the particle system here in Unity. It's quite simplistic to use, I think. So let's take a look at it right now. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the particles. This is the default particles, and we're not going to use it. We really want it to look like smoke is coming out the back of this rocket. So we're going to come down here, and we're going to use something that's called texture sheet animation. Now, you have a choice. If we take a look, maybe I'm skipping ahead here, and I'm not really sure the best way to teach this because it's a pretty complicated subject. Right now we're using this default particle material, and ultimately we don't want to. We ultimately want to use a material that looks like smoke is puffing out the back of our rocket. But right now it's using this, and you can go through and you continue using blobs like this. You can change the color of the blobs. Like if I go back up here, I can say I don't want the blobs to be white. I want them to be, red or whatever you want. You can change all that kind of stuff. But what I really love using is the actual textured animation, and that allows you to do some really amazing effects really, really cheaply. Now, let's go into our materials for a minute, and we're going to create a new material. So create. Boop. Material. And let's call this smoke trail. It doesn't really matter what we call it. Smoke trail material. All right, it's going to be our smoke trail material. I want to change this albedo. I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to add to it our smoke sprites. I want to make sure, okay, so that's good. Our smoke sprite. You can see how it changed down here. I'm going to change this from opaque into transparent. Okay, so now I can see through it. You can also use cutout. I'm not sure what the difference between the two is. Cutout, actually you want to use cutout. Cutout removes all of the alpha. All right, so use cutout. So that's our new material. Great. Let's go back to our smoke down here. And let's change the material. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go down to our renderer, and instead of using the default particles, let's change this to smoke and see what happens. So boom, we get our smoke coming out. Now that looks poopy still. We don't like that. That doesn't look good. That does not look good at all. But at least now it's smoke. What we really want to do is we want to set it up so it's an animated texture. All right, here is our texture sheet animation, and we're going to say use that instead. Number of tiles, 1, 1. No, it's not actually. In the X, it is 1, but in the Y, no, maybe it's backwards. In the X, it's actually 4. Is that right? There we go. So now what we're getting is we're getting a puff of smoke coming out. Now it's going all over the place, and we don't want to do that. But at least now we're only getting a puff of smoke. All right, I'm going to go back up here. Instead of having such a slow cycle time, let's say the lifetime is 5. Now you can see if you watch an individual particle, you can see that over time how they're growing, all right? And they grow. And basically what it's doing is it's going through that animation sheet and saying, okay, after so much time I have to have this one, after so much time I have to have that one, etc. Let's make this maybe 3 for now. There we go. So that's perfect. Now, there's a couple of things we are going to change right now. We're going to change the emission. I want to come out at a rate of 1. All right, so it's only coming out in little tiny puffs. Now, I might change that a little bit later on. We're going to go back and we're going to take a look at exactly how we want to set it up to make sure it's looking the way we like. 1 is not what we want. I'm just showing this to you so that we can go back and you can see the changes I make so it's not going all over the place. What I do want to happen is I don't want it to travel very far. That's for sure. Right now, if we see the start speed, it's really high and it's traveling a fair distance. I don't want it to. I only want it to travel a very, very short distance. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my start speed, and I'm going to adjust this to 0. I don't want it to actually move. All right. So now, let's move this over a little bit so we can actually see it. And I'll put it back at 0 in a minute. It's right on top of the camera. All right. So now we can see that our smoke is kind of appearing, it's not appearing in one location, but it's appearing much more contained, and it's not really moving anywhere now, which is what we wanted. That's the first thing we changed is the start speed. The next thing we're going to change is, let's go down here, and we're going to take a look at the shape that it's coming out of. Our current shape is a cone. And the cone has a very, very wide, well, the angle doesn't really matter. It has a very, very wide radius. We're going to adjust this radius down, down, down. So you saw how the blue thing right there got much smaller. All right? The blue thing got much smaller. That is the radius of the cone itself. Let's make this into 0.1. All right? So now we can see that our smoke is only appearing in one location. Perfect. I like that. I don't mind that at all. That looks pretty darn good. All right. So we're going to leave that like that. The last thing that I want to do is this gravity modifier. It's not the last thing I want to do. The gravity modifier. I want this smoke to have a slight upward trend, like it's drifting smoke. Okay. We know that if we give it a value of 1, these things are just going to fall out. It's going to poop smoke out. All right. I don't want it to do that. I want this to float upwards. So I'm going to give it a value of negative 0.2. And even that's too much. Let's say negative 0.05. That might even be too much, but we'll take a look at it a little later on. We can actually adjust that as we go. So you can see that right now I've got some gravity, a negative gravity affecting this guy here. That's probably better. -1, a slight drift. All right. So far, so good. This is basically all you have to do for particles. You have to go through and adjust the settings until you get what you're looking for. All right, let's go down a little farther. We have a number of choices here. Velocity over time. Is it speeding up? Is it slowing down? What's happening to it over time? Is there a directionality to it? And I'm not going to add anything to that. Limit velocity over time, over lifetime, I'm not going to do that. Force over lifetime, I've kind of got the force I like on it, so I'm not going to worry about that. Color over lifetime, this is the next one I want to adjust. So what I want to basically do, click here. What I basically want to do is I want this thing here to start off as an opaque cloud, and then slowly I want it to drift off into having an alpha of 0. So it should fade away over time. They should pop up and they should fade away over time. All right, that's what that is. So I'm going to leave that. That's good. Size over lifetime, I'm not too worried about. We could do things like adjust how big our clouds were, and we can give it kind of a random value up in here if we want to. Let's try that right now. I'm jumping back and forth, guys, and I'm sorry. This is usually how you do particle systems. You change something, you see how it looks, and you make some changes. So our start lifetime is currently 3. Let me show you this because this is pretty interesting. This little arrow here lets you choose whether it's a single value, a constant value, whether it's a curve, so there might be some on either end, or if it's a randomly generated value between 0 and something, or between any number, like between 2 and 5, let's say. So you're going to get some bigger, some smaller. All right. You don't know what size you're going to get. Sorry, that's the lifetime, how long they're going to live. You can do the same thing with the start size, and I'm going to do that. Start size. I'm going to make a random between, let's say, 1 and 2. So I'm going to get some bigger puffs and some smaller puffs. All right. You can go through it and you can have some kind of random rotation. So your clouds are always in a different rotation, somewhere between 0 and let's say 90. So I don't know which way they're going to be. All right, that's how they're starting off. And we can go through and we can change any of these things you want. Start color, etc., etc. All right. Let's go down here. That's too far down. I'm going to change, let's see, rotation over lifetime. Let's give this thing here a slight spin. So you can see my smoke now is kind of like rolling off. All right. And once again, you can give it a random angular velocity, random between 0, let's make it between negative 45 and 45. So you're kind of getting roiling in there. It's kind of like roiling smoke. We're going to go through and we're going to make a bunch of different changes to this in order to affect how it's going to look. Okay. One thing we want to make sure, however, is that when we move, let's go up here because this is where we're going to affect it. When we actually move our projectile, and too bad we're not going to see it. When we actually move our projectile, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to say don't maximize on play, and I'm going to say play. Oh, I forgot that was it. That didn't work how I wanted it to. Hold on one second. Let me make this projectile for now is kinematic, so it's not going to fall. Ultimately, we don't want it to be that. I want it to shoot, but for now, I'm going to say is kinematic. When I say play, we see our smoke coming out. All right? Watch what happens when I drag this around. That is not what we want. We want our smoke trail to be left behind. All right? So I'm going to stop this for a second. I'm going to go back to my smoke trail, and I'm going to say simulation space is, instead of local, our simulation space is world. All right? You want to make sure you change that. Now watch what happens when I say play. We get our smoke coming out, and when I move this, oops, I'm moving the wrong thing. When I move my projectile, the smoke is staying wherever it's been created. All right? Now, you can decide how you want your puffs of smoke to work. I'm going to change it right now to have more puffs. Let's say, I don't know, 10. Doesn't really matter. Play. And now when I move this guy around, my projectile around, I'm going to be getting a smoke trail. All right? So that is how our smoke is working. All right? And you have to decide how long. Those are pretty big puffs. You have to decide how long you want it to survive, how much smoke you want coming out. All that kind of stuff for yourself. Okay? All that kind of stuff for yourself. Pause. All right, let's change this off so it's no longer is kinematic because I don't want it to be is kinematic. I think, guys, that's all we need to do in this episode. I think that sets up everything the way I want it to be set up. I have to add a lot of code now, and basically what this is going to be about from this point on is once you've got... Oh, no, actually I'm lying. There is something else we have to do. We're going to have a location on our character where this shoots out from, but you know what? We're going to add that later on. We're going to add that in our next episode, in our coding episode, so you can see how everything ties together. And it'll probably be much easier to do it that way rather than trying to. Oh, I do want to do one thing. Pre-warm, looping pre-warm. Watch what happens. I want to show you guys one more thing. Watch what happens. If I say with pre-warm off and I say play. Oh, I forgot. Hold on. Is kinematic again. If I turn it on and I say play, the smoke doesn't come out right away. It's actually a second before the smoke actually puffs out. We have a pretty short we have a pretty short lifetime, so it comes out pretty fast, and our duration's kind of short, so it comes out pretty fast. But if we say pre-warm, what that means, the pre-warm check button says already have some smoke in place when you come alive. So as soon as I say play, there's already smoke there. All right, there's already smoke existing. Move the wrong thing again. There's already smoke existing as soon as we said play. It was automatically there. All right. So guys, what I want you to do is I want you to go through right now, make your smoke look the way you think it should look, make the way you like it, and in the next episode we are going to start actually writing the code. All right. I know this was kind of a fast introduction to particles. There's a lot to learn in particles, and there's a lot of ways to make this stuff look really, really awesome. A lot of magical effects you can make, or fireballs, or pretty much anything you want to make in a game. Particles is what makes your game look really good. In my opinion, that's the truth. The right set of particles makes your game look really, really awesome. So guys, take a few minutes and make sure your particles are working the way you want them to. You will notice that if I don't click on it, you don't see it. If I click off of it, it's no longer being actually generated. So make sure you've got your particles clicked on and in order to be able to see what you're actually creating. Alright guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. If you did, let me know with a thumbs up. If you didn't, a thumbs down is perfectly fine. It helps me. A thumbs down is going to help me. As long as you just don't say, oh, thumbs down, it sucked. I want you to go down to the bottom, write in the comments, and say what you liked and what you didn't like, okay? If you didn't like it for some reason, you're saying, I don't know. You talk too fast. That's probably true. I'm a fast talker. Then that's fine. Just let me know, guys. If you think I'm going too quickly in the episodes or whatever, thumbs down. You're going too fast. The episodes are too quick. Or you're covering too much, or whatever you want. Just let me know what it is so I can make changes to what I'm doing. All right, everyone. Thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below. And if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of 2D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, we built ourselves the projectile that our character is going to eventually be able to shoot out. It's a little rocket with a little bit of smoke coming out the back. Let me just click on it here so we can actually see it. A little bit of smoke coming out the back. That was what we built, and we only built the actual physical assets. We did not include any code or anything like that to be able to make it move. In fact, if I hit play, all that's going to happen is it's going to fall off the screen. Alright, so there's a couple of things that we're going to need to do next. We really want this thing to be able to fire out of the character's gun, so somewhere around here, whenever the player pushes the fire button. And we're going to use the left mouse click to be the fire button. So whenever the player presses the fire button, we want this rocket to shoot out. We want it to fly away from the character at a certain speed. We want it to be able to hit something and explode. Alright, there's a whole bunch of stuff we're going to need to do in this episode, so let's get started. Okay, so in the last episode, like I said, we built the projectile, and we broke it up into several different parts. The projectile itself, which is kind of like the envelope that's going to be carrying everything. Our missile, which is basically just the graphic itself as well as a collider that's going to allow us to hit things. And lastly, the missile smoke system, which is going to be a smoke trail left behind. Something pretty added to our actual object. Now, the projectile itself is where our rigid body is located. A couple things. I just hit play, and this object fell off the screen. It just kind of fell away. And that's fine. That is based on this gravity scale right here. We currently have our gravity set up to a specific thing. I think we have it set up to 30. But our gravity is set up right now. This gravity is going to be acting on this object 100%. So 1 times our current gravity. And you really have a choice here. You can leave this as it is, meaning you can leave it as 1 and it's going to fall relatively quickly off the screen. When we set up our jump, we set up our gravity to be pretty high, so it's going to fall off the screen pretty quickly. In the game that I created, actually had this set to 0. And what that means is that gravity is not going to affect my rigid body. So this rigid body is not going to be affected by gravity. And you might say, well, why do you have a rigid body? Well, I'm actually still going to use forces to propel this thing along. So I'm going to leave it. I'm still going to use the rigid body. You didn't have to. I could have actually directly manipulated the transform in order to make this thing fly off the screen. But I'm going to go through it and use the rigid body instead. So I'm setting the gravity to 0. If you want to, in your game, you can say, you know what, I want my projectile to have a certain amount of fall. So if you want to, let's say you want to be able to arc this object, so you want to be able to shoot over a wall or something like that, you could give it a gravity of, let's say, 0.1. It doesn't really matter what you choose. Now when I hit play, it's still going to fall, but at a much slower pace, all right, at a much slower rate. So if you want to, you can actually add some gravity scale to your object. Like I said, mine was 0, which means it's going to go in a straight line, and there's not going to be any kind of gravitational pull on it. And but adding a little bit of gravity to your game on the projectile might make for an interesting change in gameplay. It'll allow you to shoot through a hole and drop down, or shoot over a wall, or something like that. So you guys can really decide what you want to do. And maybe I'll even change it up later on after I've played a bit. But for now, I'm going to leave my gravity scale to 0. Now, the next thing that I have to do is I want to add some kind of force to this object so that the object itself travels away from the character. And we're going to do it in 2 steps. And at first, we're going to simply add a force to it so you can see it fly. And then later on, what we're going to do instead is we're going to add we're going to determine which way the character is facing and add an appropriate force. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to go to Add Component. And so we're currently on Projectile on the top layer of my rocket. I'm going to say Add Component. And when I do, I'm going to say Add a new script. And I'm going to call this a script, let's call it Projectile Controller. Alright, this is going to be called the Projectile Controller, and we're going to make a lot of changes to it. So let's say create an add. Bam, and when we do, it's going to pop up here, and I'm going to move it immediately over to my scripts folder. Alright, now, I'm going to double click here, and I'm going to open up MonoDevelop. And it opened up where you can't see it, so let me move it over. Alright, so what I really want to do in this script is add. I'm basically going to control all the movement that occurs, or all the forces that occur to this object in this script, in this projectile controller. And to do so, I want to affect its rigid body. So the very first thing I'm going to do is right under here, I am going to add a variable, a rigid body 2D, that I'm going to simply call. Let's just call it my RB. All right, and maybe RB. All right, so this is going to be a reference to the rigid body, on my existing object, So wherever the script is, I'm going to go and look for a rigid body. So I'm going to go right here, and when it awakes, I don't have to do it at the start. So using the awake function, I am going to, and like I said, start and awake. I think I described this earlier. Everything occurs as soon as everything starts up, and awake occurs when this object first comes to life. All right. What I'm going to do is in my awake function, I am going to find my rigid body, and we've done this before. So I'm going to find my RB. It's going to be equal to. I'm going to set it equal to the reference get component. Get component, and it is a rigid body 2D. So I'm looking for, this line is basically, and we've seen this before, I'm basically looking for the rigid body 2D that is existing on this object. All right, and that is going to give me a reference back to it. So now I can actually refer to my rigid body. Now, right here in the awake function, what I'm going to do, upon awake, I'm immediately going to apply a force to this rigid body, which means I want it to be in motion as soon as it's instantiated. I want a force to be applied to it, and it's going to have this burst effect, kind of like a little explosion. So I'm going to use an impulse force. We'll see what that means in a minute. I'm going to use an impulse force, and I'm going to send this rocket shooting off in a direction. All right. So the first thing I want to do is I want to say my RB, because we are affecting the rigid body, dot, and I'm going to use the add force. Add the add force. All right, and add force takes a number of arguments. The first thing it's going to take is a vector 2 that says which direction the force is going to be in. And you know what we're going to do? Well, I'll just do it like this. This is how I did it here. Let me just do this. New vector 2. And it's going to be 1, 0, which is actually an existing vector. I didn't have to do it like that, but anyway, I did. So this means that it's going to be traveling in the x direction only. It's a vector 2. This vector is pointing in the x direction only with no component in the y at all. So it's just traveling in a straight line. So it's currently traveling in a straight line away from my character. All right, and I'm going to multiply this times some force. And if you want to, what you can do is you can come up here and you can add let's add it above because I like my public variables above. You can add a public variable called rocket speed if you want. It's a float. Float rocket speed, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to adjust our speed if we want to go faster or slower. And I'm going to come down here and multiply this by rocket speed. All right. So with that in mind, one last thing. Sorry, I did that wrong. Multiply by rocket speed. The next thing I want to do is I want to suggest a force mode. Now you actually have an option here whenever you're adding a force to either add the force depending on how you want to do it. Either like over time, like someone's pushing on something, so a constantly added force. So as long as there's pressure on that object, for example, if you're pushing a giant snowball or a car or whatever, you're constantly adding a force to it. Or you have the choice of an impulse force, meaning it's kind of like an explosion where there's an instantaneous force applied and the object is propelled away. We are going to use the force mode. So we're going to type in here, force mode 2D. And it's going to be dot impulse. So the dot impulse, like I said, means it is like an explosive force. It's rocketed away. All right, so that should be all I needed to do. Perfect. So with this finished, with this like this, I should now file save. So I'm going to actually save this thing here. I'm going to come on over to this guy here, and as long as there's no errors, I'm going to see my rocket speed change there. Let's make it 15. It doesn't really matter. You can adjust that value later on. When I hit play, well, watch what's going to happen. My rocket flies away. Perfect. So that's exactly what we wanted to happen. The rocket itself flew off at a particular speed. Let me turn this off. The rocket flew off at a particular speed, in this case 15. Let's try it one more time. Boom. Bam, the rocket flies away, and we can see my particles slowly dissipate, and that's exactly what we want to happen. Great. So that is the first step. That's the first step in creating our rocket. Now, you know what? I'm going to show you that one more time because there's something I want you to see. Watch down here. We've currently got this projectile in place, and that projectile, when I fire it out of the rocket, this projectile stays on there forever. And currently that projectile it's off our screen. See it flying way far away, and that projectile is going to travel